Imagine living in a society where your eye color determines your worth. That's right, your eye color decides your talent. And people with amber eyes are considered the lowest of the low. This guy ended up reincarnating 200 years into the future with the very eyes that everyone now considered trash. But people have short memories because 200 years ago, those were the most powerful eyes in existence. Back then, this boy was feared even by his own allies, but he had the brilliant idea of sending his soul into the future. Maybe he knew he would eventually be betrayed. He was always one step ahead of everyone else, so he literally held his own funeral, sealing himself inside a coffin for 200 years. I guess he was trying the Mr. Beast challenge. When he finally awakened in the future, he shattered the coffin, only to realize his body had become that of a child. The moment he stepped out, he sensed a demonic presence. He stared at the doorway as someone slowly approached. Staying on guard, the kid immediately began casting a powerful spell. But then, the person who walked in was an incredibly beautiful girl. Yeah, unbelievably beautiful. Wanna marry me? Just kidding, guys. The protagonist wondered who she was. Then she suddenly collapsed to the floor, calling out, "Master Abel." She had waited for him all this time. I wish someone would wait for me like that too. The white-haired girl reveals she's been waiting for this day all this time. Abel, however, tells himself that he can't remember her at all. With that, he wonders if he's ever had an acquaintance like her. Suddenly, a memory seems to come to his mind. In his memory, a blonde boy was asking if he was in his right mind. Then, the same boy warned that, even as a child, she was still a demon and an enemy of humanity. The memory then reveals that right after defeating the demon lord, he saved the life of a demon girl. Back then, Abel argued that a mere child couldn't do anything, and that killing her wouldn't change the situation. Faced with this answer, the other boy just watched him. Meanwhile, the little girl kept crying on the floor. Back in the present, Abel comments that she cried a lot back then and is surprised at how far she's come in 200 years. Hearing this, the girl stares at him for a moment. Then he greets her, saying, "It's been a while, Lilith." The girl then starts to tear up in front of him. With that, Lilith confirms her identity and says she's finally found him. Lilith narrates that for over a century, she's been searching for Abel-sama, who was expelled from the hero's party. So, she continues, explaining she did all this to repay her debt of gratitude. She reveals that she discovered the place where he would reincarnate. At this, Abel reflects that time must have weakened the cave's barriers, as he was complacent and never imagined demons would find his hiding spot. Next, he prepares to ask Lilith about something he noticed. Then, Abel comments that her eyes were once the same amber color as his. A narration then explains that a person's eye color reflects the color of their soul. Given this, he wonders if she somehow managed to discard her amber-colored eyes. He completes the thought, questioning if she did something that even he couldn't in his past life. Lilith replies that maybe, but it would be faster to just show him. Then, she brings her hands to her face, leaving Abel confused about her intention. With a quick gesture, her eyes suddenly change to an amber color. Lilith then closes her eyes for a moment. Right after, she opens them, revealing they are now amber-colored. Next, she explains that these are known as contact lenses. Lilith then states that with them, it's possible to change your eye color. Abel, surprised, asks if change is possible with those mere translucent sheets. A narration then recalls that this world has a long history of discrimination and oppression against those with colored eyes. Then, the same narration laments all the wars and lives sacrificed just because of eye color. Abel then reflects that it was hard to believe all of it could have been avoided with simple translucent sheets. With that, Lilith approaches, calling out to Abel-sama. Then she tells him she's prepared a house nearby as she wraps something around him. Lilith then explains that it's a scarf to keep him warm, as it's quite cold outside. As soon as they leave the cave, the two are met with a snow-covered landscape. Outside the cave, the narration describes the endless snow and a small village at the base of the mountain. With this, the boy realized how much Lilith looked forward to their arrival, even if she said nothing. Abel describes the house as spacious and with all the amenities. As they enter, he narrates that this was the first time he'd ever seen a lamp. Then, the narration reveals that the place also had a personal library. Lilith then comments that, knowing his love for reading, she prepared this space. With that, she explains that the books would be the most efficient way for him to get familiar with the present, which leads Abel to thank her. While flipping through one of the books, the boy remembers that 200 years ago, books were the greatest luxury that existed. The narration continues, explaining that paper was expensive in his time. Furthermore, Since they were all handwritten, the price was exorbitant. But in this world, a technological revolution seemed to have occurred. The boy learns that they now have a magic stone that can transform various types of energy depending on its use. Thanks to this, the civilization of that place had evolved drastically. As he reads, Abel deduces that the lamps must be a byproduct of those magic stones. With this, he questions why they would automate things that can be done with magic, concluding that modern mages have gotten lazy. In a way, the sun was rising over the village. Then he states that his guess was right. Then, Abel confirms that the skill level of mages in the current era had completely plummeted. Abel realizes that the content of that magic book, considered innovative, was common knowledge to any child 200 years ago. To make matters worse, he notices the book also proudly displays incorrect magical formulas. With that, he reflects that if someone tried to use that as a basis for their magic, the result would be a technique full of flaws that would fail 100% of the time. Thus, he concludes that while their technology may have advanced, their magic was in total decline. Suddenly, a noise at the door interrupts him, making him wonder who it could be. Then, he realizes the sound seemed to have come from inside the house itself. As the footsteps approach, he realizes it doesn't sound like Lilith and wonders where she went. Then, a figure jumps in front of him and shouts to get his attention. The newcomer then deduces that Abel must be Lilith's younger brother. Confused, Abel wonders what the boy is talking about and if he's an acquaintance of Lilith's. The blonde boy then exclaims for the commoner to rejoice. He then introduces himself as Ted and declares that from this day forward, Abel will be under his guidance. At this, Abel wonders if that boy is trying to make him his disciple. As he observes him, Abel notices his clothes are very flashy and wonders if he's a noble. Then, he remembers there's a mansion next to this house and assumes the place belongs to the boy. Abel then returns to his reading and declines the offer, saying he has no interest in that kind of master-student relationship. The boy, however, insists that he become his disciple. Given his insistence, Abel just wishes the boy would give up already. With that, he decides he should maybe try to scare him away. Abel then rests his hand on the book beside him. He then advises him to stay away, which leaves the other boy speechless. Right after, Abel asks him if he understands what these eyes mean. Upon seeing them, the boy backs away while exclaiming about those eyes. Abel then confirms, explaining that these are the eyes related to demons. The blonde boy just touches his own lip in reaction. Ted points at the boy and exclaims in surprise that they're the amber eyes. He then falls to the floor laughing, celebrating that it's his first time seeing them and that they actually exist. Not understanding, Abel wonders what's happening and why the boy isn't scared. Then, a voice calls for Ted from outside the room. A man then enters and scolds him, saying he shouldn't be barging into Lilith-san's house. At this, Ted excitedly calls him Boss Nichan. The boy then gets up and tells Boss Nichan to look at this. Ted points at Abel's chick eyes, stating that he's never seen them before. Bass then comments that he understands, as Lilith-san had mentioned her incredibly talented brother was moving in. An image of Lilith then comes to mind. Observing Abel, Bass concludes that he seems to have set his expectations too high. Ted then explains that the so-called chick eyes have zero aptitude with all attributes. He continues saying they can't use water, wind, creation, or healing magic. Thus, the boy concludes that they are completely powerless eyes, which surprises Abel. The narration then reveals that, in fact, the amber eyes require extensive training. The narration explains that for the first 10 years of training, one cannot properly use any magical attribute. But after that period, they can control all attributes perfectly. With that, the narration concludes that, although there are variations, they can perfectly execute the highest level magic of all attributes. Abel then reflects that although such eyes were persecuted in the past, there's no doubt that they are exceptional in their performance. Meanwhile, Bass tells Ted not to exaggerate. He then tells Abel that people can still lead fulfilling lives, even if they can't use magic at the moment. With that, Bass states he's sure they'll find a way to help each other, and that they should get along. Abel then wonders if the man wants him to take care of those two, and if he also thinks the amber eyes are useless. Then, Bass invites them to come home to learn some magic, as the chosen ones need to fulfill their destiny. Ted excitedly agrees and says goodbye, saying he'll see him later. Chick eyes. In an instant, the two close the door and leave. Alone, Abel reflects on their audacity to barge into his house, insult him, and then leave, but now he understands the situation with that pair of brothers. With his gaze fixed on the books, he he finally realizes what happened. The narration then explains that, according to the war history he read, there hasn't been a war with the demon race for at least 100 years. As a result, the world was now living in a long period of peace. The narration continues, revealing that without the fearsome demons, there was no longer a reason to fear the amber eyes. Furthermore, with magic levels steadily declining, and those with amber-colored eyes needing extensive training to learn magic, they became the most ridiculous thing in the modern world. Abel then realizes that, first, they suffered persecution, and now only ridicule. With that, the boy wonders if it would be so difficult to live a normal life in this place. Suddenly, Lilith's voice echoes through the house, announcing she's back. Upon seeing her, Abel comments that he understands and starts to ask what her job is. Abel then asks if her job is to be a servant, but she corrects him, saying they are now called maids. The girl then asks if she looks good in the maid uniform, to which he replies yes. Abel then watches her and says he finally understands the situation. Then, he reveals that he now understands why she went to such lengths to hide her eye color with contact lenses. Abel begins to reflect on the 200 years that have passed since his reincarnation. Amber eyes have become the target of ridicule, a fate completely different from the prestige they once held. Lilith thinks about how difficult life has become for people with amber eyes, while Abel realizes that's why she wears contacts. With that, Lilith calls out to him and explains that over those 200 years, the demon race lost its former power. She continues, saying that after his party of heroes defeated the Supreme Lord, humanity continued hunting down the remaining demons. Once the world found peace after the demon race's defeat, the level of mages declined drastically. As a result, Abel realizes that the fear of amber eyes disappeared, and everyone forgot that their owners could become the strongest. With that in mind, Abel turns to Lilith and asks whether, as a demon, she still harbors any resentment toward humans. Lilith replies that Abel-sama always protected her with all his might. She then recalls how he traveled with her to find a safe place where she could live. On top of that, Abel taught her how to use magic and the rules of human society so she could blend in. The girl steps closer and tells Abel-sama that she deeply admires him and is grateful for everything he has done. With her face close to his, Lilith softly calls him Abel-sama. Then she says that if he is truly worried about her, she has one humble request. The girl then begins to make her request. Moments later, Abel wonders how things ended up like this, with the two of them sharing a bath. She apologizes, explaining that his concern for her made her so happy that she simply couldn't hold back her feelings. Abel then asks whether she understands the implications of a man and a woman being alone in the same bath. Lilith replies that it's amusing to hear that coming from him, since with his youthful appearance, his words don't carry much weight at the moment. Even so, the girl admits that it makes her happy. She then reveals that the reason is because someone like Abel-sama acknowledged her as a woman. Hearing that, the boy simply remains silent. The narration then reveals that night, he and Lilith shared the same bed. With that, Abel narrates that he experienced a sense of peace in his sleep that he hadn't felt in over 200 years. Abel's narration begins, explaining that ever since his reincarnation, he spent every morning having breakfast with Lilith. He then spent his afternoons in the library gathering information about the world, but around noon, something different always happened. At that time, the library door would always burst open. Soon, Ted would storm inside, announcing the arrival of Tiny Eyes. Abel would think that the pompous young noble probably just wanted a playmate his own age. So he would get ready to say that, unfortunately, he didn't have time to entertain children while jumping out the window to escape. In an instant, the boy was running across the snow-covered rooftops. From the window, Ted could only stare in complete disbelief. He then asked what that was and how Abel could move like that. The narration explains that it was only a fraction of his body enhancement magic, yet it was enough to shock Ted. Ted then shouted from the window that he would show off his own skills too. With one leap, he jumped out of the library as well. Watching him, Abel concluded that, at the very least, the boy could use some body enhancement magic. However, Abel noticed that he lacked the fundamentals, as too much unrefined mana was leaking out. Realizing this, he knew the boy was wasting far too much energy and wouldn't make the jump. The next moment, Ted began falling from the sky while screaming. Soon the boy crashed hard into a patch of bushes. Seeing that, Abel quickly rushed to where he had landed. As soon as he got close, he asked if the boy was okay. Suddenly, Ted burst out of the bushes with a shout. He then ran toward Abel, yelling not to worry about him, tiny eyes. With a single movement, Abel easily sidestepped the boy as he ran past. Unable to stop himself, Ted slammed straight into the wall of a nearby house. While the boy complained that it hurt, Abel remarked that he was surprisingly tough. He then stated that with nearly 20 years of diligent training, he might eventually become decent at magic. Ted demanded to know how a subordinate dared to act so arrogantly, but Abel replied that he didn't remember ever agreeing to be one. Then, an idea seemed to cross Abel's mind. With that, he walked over to the boy and said that if he insisted, he wouldn't mind becoming his subordinate. With that, he approaches the boy and says that if he insists, he wouldn't mind being his subordinate. Ted is surprised that Abel is motivated, but Abel says he'll only do it on one condition. Abel then remembers the scarf Lilith gave him to keep warm. That item is valuable in their village since it snows for half the year. Abel tells Ted that if he can take his scarf, he'll become his subordinate. Ted says that just taking the scarf sounds way too easy, and Abel thinks to himself that Ted will probably interrupt his studies. He says he'll use him for some physical training. As he runs, he says it's better to use him for this kind of training, as Ted chases after Abel. Getting tired, Ted yells for Abel to wait up. Using his skills, Abel wants to evaluate Ted's abilities. As he leaps to a roof, Abel wants to assess the mages of this era, while Ted is stunned by what he just saw. Using his enhancement magic, Ted says he can use that ability too as he jumps towards Abel, but he ends up slamming into a wall. Watching him from the rooftop, Abel reflects that the difference in their levels is vast. Still, the boy doesn't give up and gets back on his feet. Then, Ted starts chasing him across the rooftops, shouting for him to wait. Abel, however, finds the boy's persistence surprising. The narration then explains that Ted should have already realized how inefficient his physical enhancement magic is. Even so, Abel continues to leap around without using magic, while the other boy stubbornly continues to chase him. With that, the narration describes him as not being particularly handsome. The narration continues, adding that he doesn't seem very bright either as he yells that he's going to catch him. Despite everything, the boy shows decent stamina, even though he's quite loud. He keeps running with all his might, until he finally trips and falls face first onto the roof. Exhausted, Ted asks why he isn't tired, and Abel narrates that it's because they train differently. Then, Abel tells him that sunset is still a long way off, and asks if he wants to give up. With a shout, Ted drags himself across the roof to try and grab him. Abel's narration, however, describes his movement as slow, far too slow. With a simple movement, he dodges the boy's hand, leaving him confused. Completely exhausted, Ted finally admits he can't go on any longer. Then the boy collapses face down on the roof, with no strength left to move. Abel then reflects that he expected him to last 5 minutes, but he held on for 20, proving that, though pathetic, he had noble blood in his veins. With that, he assumes the boy has already done basic physical training and decides to head back to the library. Suddenly, something from the house catches his attention. As he turns around, he wonders what he's seeing through the window. The scene reveals Lilith and Bass, who seem to be having a rather lively conversation. Abel then uses physical enhancement to sharpen his hearing. With the magic active, he hears Lilith say that, as she's told him countless times, she can't be in a relationship with him, Bass-sama. Hearing that, he turns around, surprised by the revelation. From inside, Bass asks why and what's wrong with him, making Abel wonder if this is about love. On the roof, Abel reflects that he just overheard a strange conversation. From this, he deduces that for a proud noble like Bass, being rejected by a woman must be a huge blow. Back in the conversation, Lilith explains that it's not a matter of dissatisfaction, but something else. Then, she reveals that there is someone to whom she has already given her heart. Hearing that from the rooftop, Abel is visibly surprised. Bass then starts to question who this person could be. Then, he asks if by any chance it could be her younger brother Abel. Faced with the question, Lilith just looks at him with a faint smile. With a radiant smile, she confirms that yes, he's right. Her confirmation reaches Abel's ears. Bass then wonders how she could fall in love with her own brother. Then, he yells that Lilith is an immoral woman and that she should be ashamed. Outside, Abel questions the words immoral and ashamed. He then reflects that even if they are siblings, that seems a bit too harsh. Abel's narration reveals that in fact he isn't Lilith's brother. With that, he concludes she probably made it look that way, so her story would fit together better. From inside the house, Bass kept asking how she could fall in love with her own brother. He then accuses her of being an immoral woman and tells her she should be ashamed of herself. From the roof, Abel thinks that this guy, Bass, is really starting to get on his nerves. Still, he thinks it's a shame to see him get shot down like that, so he decides to pretend he saw nothing. The narration then reveals that, ever since that day, Ted would chase him every day, yelling for him to wait. And so, playing tag with the boy became his daily routine. Abel narrates that back in those days, watching Ted led him to a certain conclusion. He goes on to explain that the boy's eyes, which excel at fire magic, are known as ruby eyes. However, Abel notices that he doesn't seem particularly skilled with his primary elemental magic. The narration then reveals that if you lack the ability to understand complex magical syntaxes, mastering elemental magic is a challenge. Because of that, Abel concludes it's probably too challenging for someone as straightforward as him. Even so, Ted uses magic to boost his feet and try to catch up to him. While watching the boy, Abel reflects that he does have some aptitude for physical enhancement magic. The narration continues, explaining that this kind of magic doesn't require logical thought, but relies on primitive sensory intuition. With that, Abel concludes this style might be a good fit for Ted's straightforward way of thinking. In a swift move, the blonde boy lunges at him with a shout. Abel realizes the boy has improved over the last few days. From a window, Bass watches the scene on the rooftops, surprised by what he's seeing. He can hardly believe Ted's skill level, but Abel narrates that 200 years ago, anyone could have reached that level. Abel then easily blocks the boy's punch. He then comments that Ted's only improved a little and hits him back. Abel then claims that an attack like that would only annoy a fly, and with that, Ted is sent flying across the snowy roof. The boy then hits the ground, completely motionless. Still, he gets up and starts cursing at Abel. As he tries to move forward, he slips on the snow and yelps in surprise. While slipping, the boy plummets from the rooftop. Abel is taken aback by what just happened. He hits the ground and screams in pain from the impact. Lying in the snow, the boy complains about how much it hurts. Abel then runs over to him, wondering if the boy broke a bone in the fall. He then reflects that he isn't skilled in recovery magic, but for an injury like this, it should be enough. Suddenly, Bass comes running up, asking if Ted is all right. He then shoves Abel aside and announces he's going to use recovery magic on him right now. Abel watches, noticing that even without gray eyes, Bass can still use recovery magic. As Bass heals him, Abel admits he might have underestimated the guy a little. However, something about the magic catches his eye. Bass continues to focus his energy on the boy's wound. The process, however, only makes Ted scream louder in pain. The sight leaves Abel visibly concerned. A narrator then explains that recovery magic is like building with blocks. The narration continues, explaining that the more advanced the magic, the more intricate the details become. Normally, to avoid a collapse, the process starts with larger blocks and moves on to smaller ones. Bass's magic, however, is like stacking a large block on a small one and using glue as reinforcement, a sloppy, rushed job. As the healing continues, Ted cries out in even more pain from the process. Abel then realizes that, connected like this, the magic could cause the nerves to grate against each other, leading to serious complications. So, he suggests that Bass should take the boy to the infirmary for proper treatment. Bass, however, screams that he didn't ask for his opinion and accuses him of pushing Ted off. The accusation catches Abel off guard for a moment. Bass then walks up to him, stating that he's just a commoner. He continues, explaining that Ted is a nobleman, the legitimate second son of the Langobard family. Bass then insults him, calling him a country bumpkin with inferior eyes. With that, he swears he will make him regret insulting a nobleman. Bass then rests a hand on his sword, stating he shows no mercy to the insolent and asking how he dares tarnish their honor. He then challenges him to a duel. Abel stares at the sword, simply wondering what a duel is. Meanwhile, as Ted continues to scream in pain on the ground, Abel is left wondering why on earth they would duel now. With his sword raised, Bass questions how he dares tarnish their honor. The man then moves forward, weapon drawn, challenging him to a duel. Abel, however, simply reflects that the man is completely lost in his rage. He then notices a crowd has gathered, drawn by the commotion. The boy then thinks that drawing attention in the middle of the city isn't wise, but decides to go on. Faced with the challenge, Abel simply agrees to the condition. He then states that he accepts the proposed challenge. Bass then explains the rules for the duel will be one-on-one, with the first to surrender losing, and offers him an advantage because of his age. The boy just listens to the proposal in silence. Abel refuses the offer and says there's no need for advantages, as he just wants to get it over with. The narration then reveals that he doesn't have time for this. With that, Abel reflects that he is partially responsible for the situation and that they need to treat Ted quickly. The boy then thinks to himself that Ted just needs to wait a little longer. Faced with the refusal, Bass asks him how much longer he plans to insult him. With his sword glowing, the man warns him that he will regret this. With a shout, Bass launches an energy attack with his sword, the Wind Blade. As he sees the attack, Abel studies it, trying to understand the nature of the technique. As soon as he dodges, he admits to himself that the man is better than he thought. The blow then strikes a tree behind him, slicing it in half on impact. Abel then reflects that while the power is average, the spell's construction was far too quick. He then recalls that 200 years ago, only he could cast magic at that speed. Even so, he notices that Bass doesn't seem like a skilled mage, which leads him to a conclusion. The boy deduces that the strange sword must be the reason, and that there must be some trick to it. Bass then scoffs at his reaction, asking if this is his first time seeing a regalia. He then explains that a regalia acts as a support for casting magic. Bass then prepares to attack, stating that, thanks to it, he can activate magic at an overwhelming speed. With a leap, Abel easily dodges the new energy attack. As he watches him, the boy just stares in silence. Abel finally understands that the sword has a power source built into it. Abel then concludes the sword is just a well-made toy, and there's no other way to put it. With that, Bass leaps and exclaims for everyone to behold his power. Several energy blades are then launched at him. Abel, however, considers the situation ridiculous and states that he has no time for this charade. In a swift move, he blocks the attack with his bare hands. Bass then asks in disbelief how he blocked his magic with his bare hands. With this, Abel realizes that the introduction of the regalia was one of the reasons for the decline in mages' magical abilities. The narration explains that the regalia is indeed convenient, so convenient that modern mages must have had a certain thought. The narration then reveals the thought. With a regalia, who needs to build a power source? In a world without their natural enemy, the demons, this might even be acceptable. The narration, however, concludes that the regalia robbed mages of the need to think. Abel then says that as a token of appreciation for his help with this test, he'll show him true magic, leaving Bass confused. Abel's eyes then glow as he prepares himself. The boy then begins to weave a complex spell with his hands. Abel then conjures his own version of the Wind Blade. Seeing the dozens of energy blades, Bass turns, utterly stunned by the power of the attack. With that, one of the blades hits him square in the chest. The impact sends him flying backward, knocking him hard to the ground. Abel narrates that he added some flashy effects to emphasize their difference in skill, but still held back quite a bit. On the ground, Bass wonders how he, a nobleman, could lose to a commoner with such inferior eyes. Before he can finish his sentence, a blur rushes toward him. Suddenly, Lilith appears and lands a solid kick to his face. The blow sends him flying, rolling across the stone floor. Lilith then states that honestly, she would have ignored a simple insult directed at her. However, she says she won't forgive any more insults aimed at Abel-sama. The girl then approaches and calls him Bass-sama. With glowing eyes, she asks if his life is precious to him. Frightened, the man can only utter her name in response. Seeing this, Abel calls out to her, trying to intervene. A doctor informs Ted that his full recovery will take about 6 months. The doctor then advises the young master to be patient, even though he knows the boy wants to play. As soon as he finishes giving his instructions, he leaves the room. Lying in bed, Ted wonders if it will really take 6 months to recover. Outside, Abel was watching the scene from the room's window. Then, the boy turns and walks away. Suddenly, a portal opens inside the room while Ted is sleeping. Abel's narration reveals that he first left the situation to the medical mage of that era. He explains that he did this to test his skill, but 6 months was far too long. Before the sleeping boy, he then prepares his own healing magic. A magical healing circle then forms over Ted's injured leg. The narration then explains that he first removed Bass's crude magic. Next, he enhanced the healing by connecting the bones with magic, while lamenting not having saved him before the fall. He then concludes he was completely off guard at that moment. As he watches him, the boy just remains silent for a moment. As the healing finishes, Abel simply asks the boy to forgive him. The next day, the routine in the house continued as usual. Upon leaving the library, the boy comes face to face with an unexpected figure at the entrance. Before him, Bass was staring at him with a surprised expression. Confused, Abel just calls his name to confirm his identity. Suddenly, another man yells at him, questioning how he dares address Bass-sama that way. With one blow, the newcomer is hit on the head from behind. An older man then holds him and says it's a pleasure to meet him for the first time, Abel-sama. Next, the man introduces himself as Evans Langabard. Evans then says he would like to deeply apologize for the situation, leaving Abel confused. The man then bows before him and begs him to forgive his foolish son. Bass then questions why his father is bowing to a commoner with inferior eyes. He then adds that Abel is just the brother of a maid they hired. Without hesitation, Evans hits him with a strong punch to the head. He then says it's his fault for not telling him and demands that Bass listen. Evans then reveals to Bass that they do not employ Lilith-sama. Then he yells that it is Lilith-sama who employs them. The revelation leaves Bass completely confused and speechless. Watching the scene, Abel finally understands how things really are. He then reflects that he had wondered why someone like Lilith, a high-class demon, would bow to humans. The narration then explains that there must have been many obstacles for demons to live with humans throughout history. So, pretending to be nobility, while secretly using their power for their own purposes, was one way demons found to survive in that era. The narration reveals he never saw Bass again, because according to Evans, he enrolled in the prestigious Asura Magic Academy. The school was known for training elite mages. On a snowy day, Evans tells Ted he has something to tell him. He then recalls that while hunting in the forest, he was attacked by a monster. However, he reveals that he was saved at the last moment. He then says it was Lilith-sama who saved him. The memory then shows Lilith defeating the monster with a single energy blast. Evans's narration then reveals that he was lucky to have been saved. He then explains to Ted that since then, she has helped them in many ways, and that Lilith-sama is a good neighbor and a life mentor. Hearing that, the boy just repeats the word mentor to himself. Next, Evans advises him to get along with them, and the boy agrees he was going to do that anyway. With a smile, Ted says that Abel is like a disciple and a great friend to him. Back in his room, the boy decides he needs to properly apologize and thank him. The next day, Ted goes to the neighboring house to call for Abel. As soon as he enters, he runs to the library and says, "I'll be in your care again, master." Abel, who was reading, questions him about the whole master thing, while the narration reveals that ever since, as he's gradually adjusted to this world 200 years in the future, he's been living peaceful days with Lilith. The narration then states that about 2 years have passed since he woke from the sleep induced by the reincarnation magic. Years later, an older Ted casts a burning bullet spell that explodes with great impact. Watching him, Abel comments that he has improved a lot, which makes Ted excited by the praise. The boy celebrates, saying this will give him a boost for tomorrow's entrance exam, and suggests they pass the Magic Academy's test together. Abel just stares at him in silence for a moment. Faced with the proposal, Abel questions why he would have to take an entrance exam for a Magic Academy. He recalls that 200 years ago, he was known as an unparalleled genius, with no one on his level. Back home, he asks Lilith why he needs to go to an academy now, and she asks what his plans are if he doesn't enroll. Abel replies that he'll do the same thing he did before. He then reveals his plan is to travel the world as an adventurer. Lilith, however, tells him the adventurer profession was abolished 10 years ago, leaving him shocked. Their job was to hunt demons and sell their parts to the Adventurers Guild. However, with the current decline in the number of demons, the profession is now considered unnecessary. So, Lilith asks if he plans to work with magic. She then explains that in this age of peace, that's impossible without graduating from an academy. Abel reflects that even 200 years ago, there was no one who could teach him magic, and while he understands the logic, it's hard to accept. Lilith then asks if he'd rather depend on her, which makes him happy, yet embarrassed at the thought. Defeated, he asks her to stop and agrees to take the exam. He decides this is a chance to broaden his horizons, and resolves to be optimistic. The prestigious Asura Magic Academy is in Midgard, the capital city. As soon as they arrive, a student comments on the boy wearing a uniform with no family crest. Another asks if he's the famous Inferior Eyes, and laments that even the Asura Magic Academy has fallen this low. One of them states that commoners should stick to farming, while Abel assumes they're students. The boys then comment that they heard he got into the academy through a donation from a rich family. Abel thinks to himself that nobles are as tasteless as ever, hearing them say he'll fail anyway. Ted then defends him, asking if judging by eye color is the only thing they know how to do, but Abel thinks he has no room to talk. Suddenly, a girl appears and asks them if they have no shame. She then scolds them for ganging up to badmouth a commoner. She then declares that this is low, even for nobles. The crest on her clothes then glows for a moment. Seeing it, Abel feels like he's seen that family crest before. One of the students confronts her and asks who she is, to which she replies that her name is Eliza. She then declares she is a future great mage who will graduate at the top of the academy and make a name for herself. The students ask if she's also a candidate and threaten to teach her how to speak properly. Eliza then stares them down and tells them to try their luck. With a swift movement of her sword, Eliza easily throws them off balance. Next, she points her weapon at them and asks who's really lacking in good manners. Abel, however, just thinks that the girl's swordsmanship is impressive. With that, Eliza orders them to get out of her sight immediately. Frightened, the two students just stare at her, not knowing what to do. As they walk away, one of them yells for her not to get too full of herself. After the commotion, Eliza turns to leave, which catches Abel's attention. So, he decides he should thank her and approaches to get her attention. He then tries to touch her shoulder to get her attention. Suddenly, she turns and swiftly stops him from touching her. Eliza then asks how a commoner like him dares to touch her, but admits that he's got guts. Abel, however, says he was just trying to thank her, which leaves her confused. Then she yells at him not to get the wrong idea, as she simply hates people who badmouth others behind their backs. With that, Abel just wonders if all the students at this place are like that. Eliza then warns him that if he wants her attention, he must become stronger. As she walks away, Eliza declares she's only interested in the strong. Ted wonders what's with that girl, not even knowing how strong his master is, but Abel thinks he didn't expect to meet someone with such a strong will. He then reflects that the girl's face looks familiar. The Asura Magic Academy entrance exam has two parts, a written test and a practical test. Each was worth 100 points, for a total of 200. The written test included general knowledge, magical language, and magical engineering. For Abel, the general knowledge content wasn't much different from 200 years ago, and was surprisingly easy. The magical language part was too basic for him. The last part, magical engineering, was indeed more challenging. He then comes across question 12, which asked to prove that the human soul cannot be created through magic, based on Diplodocus's final theorem. He then realizes the question's difficulty was ramped up at the end. Abel figures they're probably doing this to stop students from getting a perfect score, but that's too bad for them. He smiles, because the person behind Diplodocus's final theorem is none other than himself. That afternoon, the students gathered in the school's courtyard. An instructor then announces that they will use their regalia for the practical exam in the school courtyard. A voice instructs the examinees to select a regalia that matches their eye color. Next to Abel, Ted Langobard is thrilled by the instruction. Ted then turns to Abel and urges him to pick one, saying the weapon should match his eyes. However, one fact becomes clear. There are naturally no regalias for amber-colored eyes, so Abel decides to just grab a red regalia, figuring the one-handed sword seems safe enough. Next, the instructor explains that the exam will test each person's magical power. She points to the targets, revealing they are made of dark matter that absorbs magic. She assures them the target won't break easily, and tells them to use their most powerful spells. As soon as the instructor calls for volunteers, Ted shouts that he'll go first. The woman then announces they will start with number 28, Ted Kuhn, who celebrates with a cheer. Watching from a distance, Abel wonders if he'll really be okay. He reflects that even after looking after him for a while, there's still a lot of room for improvement. After all, his level as a mage is still at the beginner stage. Meanwhile, it's mentioned that the Asura Magic Academy is known for accepting only elite students. Abel continues his train of thought, hoping that Ted doesn't embarrass himself in front of all the other candidates. When given the signal to start, Ted Langobard focuses on the regalia in his hand. A moment later, he opens his eyes and shouts the name of his spell, Fireball. With that, the boy launches a single stream of magic towards the sky. Abel, for his part, just watches, dreading the inevitable outcome. He then concludes that this is awful, but deep down, he'd already expected it. The boy continues his analysis, thinking that it's no surprise since Ted is clumsy and is using a regalia he's not familiar with. The small fireball finally hits the center of the target with minimal impact. Despite the result, the instructor and the other candidates react with total disbelief. Abel thinks the reaction is obvious, since Ted looked like an amateur, and worries that he'll be ridiculed again. Contrary to expectations, the instructor suddenly shouts that what she saw was incredible. She turns to Ted and questions how a talent like his could end up in the general admissions. Other candidates in the crowd comment that it's unbelievable, wondering how anyone can compete after a spell like that. Completely shocked, Abel wonders if Ted's magic is really considered worthy of praise in this era. Soon after, another candidate casts his spell, Windblade. Next, a female student uses her magic, firing an ice needle at the target. To Abel, the rest of the exam seemed like complete child's play. A voice then announces that, last but not least, the next examinee is up. The instructor turns and asks if examinee number 27, Abel Kun, will take the exam. As he stares at the woman, Abel reflects that this examiner, just like all the other candidates, probably think that mages with amber-colored eyes can barely use magic, and that the invitation was just out of consideration. Next, he wonders how much longer he'll have to endure this kind of treatment. Then, Ted approaches and encourages him to show off his magic, asking if he's really not going to participate. Abel remains silent for a moment, just looking at the boy. A moment later, he answers that he will, to Ted's satisfaction. The instructor then gives the signal for Abel Kun to begin as he walks toward the field. As he raises the sword, the boy wonders what exactly he should do now. He then decides it might not be a bad idea to accept Ted's challenge, but he'll add a little something extra. In the crowd, one of the candidates tells the others to look. Another comments that he's taking too long to build a fireball, typical of the inferior eyes. With the spell almost ready, Abel mentally sets the projectile's speed to maximum. He then increases the power level to high and adds an additional spell formula, Scatter Shot. Suddenly, the boy remembers an important detail. If the target is made of dark matter. With his eyes now open, Abel decides he will release his power's limiter. Next, he finally casts his spell, Fireball Slicing Rain. With his sword raised, an immense amount of magical energy begins to form around him. The spell is then unleashed, creating a massive explosion that spreads across the field. The crowd reacts in complete shock, with one of the candidates shouting that it's huge. Abel watches the spell, knowing it's not just about being big. The energy shoots into the sky as a gigantic pillar, stunning everyone. Ted and the other candidates look up, dumbfounded by the scale of the power. A moment later, the pillar breaks apart into hundreds of projectiles that rain down over the entire target area. One of the students shouts, shocked, that he completely destroyed the target. Ted, on the other hand, celebrates with a huge smile, shouting that that's his master. Looking at the completely devastated area, Abel thinks that maybe he overdid it a little. However, he concludes that at least this should clear up some misconceptions about amber-colored eyes. The scene then shifts to another practical exam location, where other candidates are continuing their tests. Then, Eliza casts her spell, Fireblade. With a swift motion, she unleashes a powerful slash at her target. The strike hits the center of the target with a burst of energy. The impact is strong enough to leave a visible mark. Impressed, an instructor exclaims it's unbelievable that there's a dent in the dark matter. Despite the result, Eliza finds the situation tedious, wondering if they're really impressed by so little. She wonders if at this academy, supposedly the best in the country, only the facilities are high class. Suddenly, the other instructor rushes over, telling Professor Fidea there's an emergency. Meanwhile, Eliza uses a physical enhancement spell to improve her hearing. She overhears the conversation about the dark matter target, learning it was completely shattered by someone with amber eyes. The revelation leaves the girl in complete shock as she processes the information. She repeats the words she heard to herself, by someone with amber eyes. Eliza then glances in Abel's direction, wondering if they're talking about that commoner, since the area around him is now a wasteland. A faint smile forms on Eliza's face as she takes in the information. Clenching her fist, she decides the situation has just gotten much more interesting. Meanwhile, in an academy hallway, Ted celebrates excitedly, saying he got an A, the same grade as his master. Abel muses that while it's understandable, since there's no higher grade, being put in the same category as Ted is a bit questionable. With that, Ted opens a large door, announcing they've arrived at the waiting room for A-rank examinees. Upon entering, they find themselves in an amphitheater where the other candidates are already waiting. Their arrival immediately draws the attention of everyone in the room. Abel pauses for a moment, observing the faces around him. Soon, the other students start whispering, wondering if he's the one with amber eyes who destroyed the target. Suddenly, a sharp voice calls out to him, breaking the silence. Eliza approaches and confronts him directly, asking if it's true he shattered the target during the practical exam. Abel recognizes her as the girl from this morning, while Ted points at her and yells in shock that it's her. Completely ignoring the reaction, she presses Abel, demanding to know how he constructed that spell. She continues, asking if he trained under a renowned mage, since she's heard that amber eyes aren't suited for any attribute. Abel closes his eyes, wondering what kind of way that is to speak to someone. Eliza insists that dodging the question is pointless, as his skills will be revealed in the next test anyway. The argument is cut short when Professor Fedea orders everyone to be seated for the final exam briefing. She then reveals that the final exam will be a practical test simulating a duel. Sitting beside Ted, Abel repeats the word duel to himself, processing the information. With that, he realizes what Eliza meant earlier when she mentioned the next test. The professor begins explaining the rules, stating that the duels will be one-on-one. She then clarifies that the loser will be the one whose protective magic is destroyed first. Furthermore, the instructor explains that opponents will be decided based on practical exam results, pairing those of similar strength. Moments later, in an outdoor arena, the professor announces that the first match is about to begin. To no one's surprise, Abel finds himself facing Eliza, just as he expected. She then challenges him to draw his weapon and get on with the fight. He observes her, reflecting that she seems quite eager, and concludes that nobles of this era truly love to duel. Abel then informs her he won't be using a weapon, as he isn't skilled in combat with a regalia. With a smirk, Eliza asks if he's choosing to fight the old-fashioned way, adding that it's fine by her. She then draws her own sword and challenges him to show her what he's got. In midair, Eliza finishes her sentence, demanding he show her his true strength. Abel watches her rapid advance, noting her impressive speed. He then reflects that even in an era of magical decline, talents like her still exist. However, a faint aura of energy begins to form around his legs. At the very moment of impact, Abel vanishes with a light tap on the ground, much to his opponent's surprise. Completely confused, she quickly turns around, not understanding what just happened. Meanwhile, in the audience, Ted shouts enthusiastically, cheering on his master. A smile on her face, Eliza says she understands as she imbues her sword with magic. She then declares him interesting and unleashes a new attack, Fireblade. Dodging, Abel sees Eliza's attack coming at him. Then, surrounded by his own aura, he invokes the same spell, Fireblade. With that, he unleashes a much larger wave of energy that surges toward his opponent. Unable to react, Eliza can only watch the counterattack, wondering what is happening. As the two Fireblade attacks collide, the arena is engulfed by the clashing energies. Eliza can barely react, her expression showing nothing but pure shock at the power of the counterattack. The impact creates a huge explosion of energy that reverberates throughout the area. From the crowd, a surprised Ted shouts that their spells just collided. As the dust begins to settle, it reveals a scene of complete destruction on the battlefield. Abel silently observes the rubble and smoke that have taken over the place. Suddenly, the boy realizes that his opponent's presence has simply vanished. Walking through the smoke, he begins to wonder if he overdid it with his power. Contrary to his expectations, Eliza suddenly emerges from the smokescreen with a cry. He quickly understands what happened, realizing she had only hidden her presence to attack. He then concludes that, while it's not a bad strategy, there's still a flaw in her plan. With his hand at the ready, Abel states that she chose the wrong opponent for this tactic. Next, he invokes his own spell, Burning Bullet. The girl then notices, shocked, that he conjured 12 fireballs with incredible speed. Completely paralyzed, she finally recognizes that this boy is in fact very strong. The 12 projectiles hit Eliza head-on, creating a massive impact of energy. The collision kicks up a huge cloud of smoke that completely covers the battle arena. In the crowd, Ted wonders what's happening, concluding the power level gap between them is just too wide. Amidst the rubble, Abel just stands still, watching the result of his attack. The boy then admits to himself that he is, in fact, surprised by the situation. He realizes that even after that blow, she's still eager to fight. Despite all the damage she's taken, Eliza uses her sword to pull herself up. At that, Professor Fedea announces that the protection magic has been destroyed, and the match is over. However, the girl interrupts her, stating, "Not yet, ma'am. She then declares that while the exam's results may have been decided, she begs them to please let her continue the duel. Abel watches her, thinking how she's an incredibly stubborn girl, fighting not for the exam or the match, but to prove her own worth following her self-imposed rules. With difficulty, she gets up and says she'll prove to him that she is strong. Amidst the destroyed arena, Abel watches the girl in silence for a moment. He then asks her why she is so obsessed with strength in such a peaceful era. The boy then reflects on how, unlike 200 years ago, where he came from, people can now live happily without needing to be strong. However, Eliza answers him, stating that this peace is nothing but an illusion. She continues, asking if 100 years of peace with no conflict is really true. The girl then argues that just because there are international treaties, it doesn't mean war can't happen. She reveals that the neighboring country of Kuldrea is quietly strengthening its army for a potential great war. Furthermore, the girl adds that monsters could still be lurking somewhere. With a firm hand on her sword, she declares that she refuses to be complacent in the face of this false peace. With that, she yells that this is why she needs to become strong. Then, she finishes by saying she will rebuild the house that raised her. His opponent's declaration immediately catches Abel's attention. In a final effort, Eliza then begins to invoke her ultimate spell, Physical Flame. With the spell activated, a massive amount of fire energy erupts from Eliza's body. From the crowd, Professor Fidea recognizes the technique, identifying it as flame armor. However, the girl reveals the true name of the forbidden magic she's using, Madder Rose Sky. Right after, she uses the flames to propel herself and move freely through the air. Abel just watches the scene in silence, following her movements in the sky. Completely shocked, Ted yells that it's impossible and that she's flying. As she charges forward, Eliza declares she will win and warns him to be prepared. Abel remains motionless, awaiting her attack. With her wings of fire, Eliza circles in the air, preparing her final attack. From the audience, Ted Langobard wonders if that's aviation magic, which he thought was just an urban legend. Meanwhile, Abel reflects that casting aviation magic requires a balance of multiple attributes. He then recalls that, even in his time, only a few rare individuals could master it. The boy concludes it must have taken tremendous effort for someone like Eliza, with her ruby eyes, to learn such a technique. With that, Abel finally understands the situation completely. He deduces that she must have left this magic for the future as a legacy for her family. From above, Eliza taunts him, asking if he's seen that magic before, as it's her special technique. Abel, however, corrects her, stating it's quite the opposite, in fact. With his hands ready, he says that at least he now has a complete understanding of her family's situation. Abel continues, revealing he never thought a unique magic from 200 years ago would be passed down unaltered. He then supposes it's due to the stubbornness of her ancestors, but points out it's an advanced technique that consumes life force. After his analysis, the boy concludes that the verification is complete. Immediately, he points at her and invokes a counterspell. A beam of energy shoots out, hitting Eliza head-on and making her scream from the impact. Struck head-on, Eliza can barely express her surprise at the spell's speed, cast right after analyzing her magic. The counterspell then neutralizes her, demonstrating unparalleled effectiveness against spells. The girl screams in confusion as her magic shatters, since her spell had been previously analyzed. She just watches, helpless, as the fragments of her spell disintegrate around her. Without the support of her magic, the girl starts to scream as she plummets in a free fall. Immediately after, Abel propels his body upward in a leap. With a swift move, he catches her in his arms in mid-air. While holding her, he then asks if she's a descendant of Maria, the heroine of fire. The sudden question leaves the girl completely speechless, her face blushing. With that, the two land gently on the destroyed arena. Abel then praises her, saying she's quite decent, just like her ancestor, and encourages her to keep improving. Soon after, Professor Fidea announces that the winner is examinee number 27, Abel Kuhn. From the audience, Ted Langobard cheers with a shout, celebrating his master's victory. Ignoring the celebration, Abel simply turns and starts to walk away from the crowd. However, his path is blocked by other candidates, who congratulate him, saying he was incredible and that it was really cool. As she watches Abel being surrounded by the others, Eliza wonders what just happened. Right after, the girl finally gives in to exhaustion and collapses to the ground. She remains there for a moment, looking at the sky as she processes her defeat. With a groan of frustration, she then covers her face with her hand. Still on the ground, the girl shouts, cursing the situation and wondering what that guy's problem is. Meanwhile, a voice comments that this year's examinees are quite interesting. In a room at the academy, an instructor points to the three geniuses, Ted, Eliza, and Abel, who could raise the academy's standards. The scene cuts to a hand reviewing and circling the exam results with a red pen. Suddenly, another man slams his hand on the table and refutes the idea of three geniuses, calling it absurd. He then turns and states that the true genius is just one person, only Abel Kun. The first instructor argues, pointing out that he's a commoner with amber eyes, despite his high magical abilities. The man then reflects that those teachers are a lost cause and that they need to relearn everything from scratch. With that, he picks up Abel's test and says what makes him incredible isn't just his magic. He then reveals that the boy perfectly solved Diplornicus's final theorem, to the shock of the others. The instructor concludes, saying that few magic researchers even understand the theorem, and from his answer, the instructor continues, revealing that he even improved upon the theorem, a feat worthy of national recognition. Suddenly, a laugh echoes through the room as a figure approaches. The newcomer, identified as the headmaster, comments that they seem to be making quite a fuss about the examinees. Professor Emerson then turns to him and says the boy is incredible, possessing impressive talent despite his amber eyes. He continues, stating the boy has the potential to carry the country's future and become the greatest mage, and that his name is Abel. Upon hearing the name, the headmaster reacts with such great shock that he seems to choke. Startled, his dentures end up falling to the floor, leaving the other instructors worried. As they help him up, one of the instructors asks if something is wrong, but he just mutters incomprehensibly. With difficulty, the headmaster then asks Professor Emerson to repeat the student's name. The instructor then repeats, confirming the examinee's name is Abel Kun. In his mind, the headmaster recalls that the boy got perfect scores on both the written and practical exams, making him the greatest genius in the academy's history. After a moment of silence, the headmaster finally repeats the name to himself, confirming that it is indeed Abel. Later that night, the name Abel echoes through the academy's halls in a tone of disbelief. As he climbed the stairs, the headmaster kept denying the possibility that had just arisen. Soon, his path is blocked by an enchanted suit of armor that serves as a guard. The guardian then points its sword, permanently blocking the way. With that, the armor moves to the side, revealing a secret passage. The passage leads to a door with an ornate symbol in the center. The headmaster then approaches the door and opens it. Upon entering his private office, he immediately locks the door with magic. Next, the man uses an unlocking spell on one of his desk drawers. The magic reveals the drawer's contents, showing an ancient sealed letter. He then remarks that, if memory serves, he kept it right there. The drawer opens, revealing the letter tied with a ribbon. With a gesture, he uses his magic to make the letter float into his hands. The letter's seal then breaks, releasing its contents. Finally, the letter's contents are revealed, starting with the greeting, "Dear Descendants." The letter continues, stating the wish to pass on this world's truth only to his descendants. In it, it is revealed that while the four mages of fire, wind, water, and ash were proclaimed the great sages for defeating the demon lord, this is wrong. The author confesses that the four of them together couldn't even lay a finger on the demon lord. The truth, according to the letter, is that the one who truly defeated him was a lone mage with amber-colored eyes named Abel. The headmaster reads the letter's conclusion, which laments that this fact will likely be buried in the shadows of history. He then reflects that he heard this story so many times from his late grandfather, his ears might as well have calloused over. The legend told of a fifth sage, lost among the great four, a man with eyes like the demons. Despite his overwhelming power, that man suffered a terrible persecution and never left his name in history. The headmaster ponders that no matter how great a mage is, living for 200 years should be impossible. However, he concludes that dismissing the situation as a mere coincidence would be a mistake. With this, he decides he needs to gauge the boy's power for himself. The scene then moves to the day after the tumultuous entrance exam. In a cafe in the royal capital, Midgard, Abel is sitting quietly, enjoying a drink. Suddenly, Ted Langobard bursts into the cafe, shouting for his master and claiming he caught up to them. With a triumphant smile, he shows his letter and proudly announces that he passed. Right after, the boy approaches Abel with an envelope, asking if he wants to know his results. Without moving, Abel replies that there's no need, as he already knows he passed. He then points to the envelope, explaining that there are signs it's been opened and asking if Ted checked first. Abel continues, saying that with Ted's personality, he wouldn't come so cheerfully to say he had failed. With that, the boy slaps his hand on his book, asking what the next step is. Suddenly, he looks to the side and asks who the guest with them is. Behind the sofa, the top of a red-haired head slowly emerges. The figure remains hidden for a moment, just peeking over the backrest. Then, Eliza jumps up and recognizes them, exclaiming that they're the guys from that day. Enthusiastically, she comments on the coincidence, while Ted identifies her as the girl with the aviation magic. She then confirms with a smile, saying she loves the cupcakes from that cafe. As he sips his drink, Abel reflects that it's a lame excuse and that she probably followed Ted there. He then puts his cup on the table and bluntly asks what she really wants. Eliza starts to explain that it's not exactly something she wants, but that she was wondering about one thing. With a bit of hesitation, the girl then asks which class he ended up in. She tries to justify herself, admitting it seems like there's a lot she could learn from him, since she also wants to do her best. Not understanding her rambling, Abel asks what exactly she's trying to say. Ted then turns to his master and asks if he can tell her, since the information will become public soon. With a big smile, the boy reveals that both he and his master are in Class A, hoping that Eliza-san is too. Abel reflects that Ted isn't making much sense either, and wonders if there's any benefit to being in the same class. Upon hearing the news, Eliza celebrates excitedly, confirming she understood Class A. Right after, the girl turns and starts humming happily. As soon as she leaves, Ted asks what that was all about, and Abel suggests she might just be anxious about not having friends. Suddenly, a woman with silver hair and a maid's uniform enters through the cafe door. The woman's sudden arrival startles Ted, who cries out in surprise. As Ted shouts in surprise, Abel just turns around, confused by the sudden appearance. The newcomer, Lilith, just offers a subtle smile in response. With a wink, she then strikes a pose, showing off her new outfit. Abel recognizes her and immediately questions her about the outfit. With a radiant smile, Lilith announces that, as of today, she has been appointed a professor at the Asura Magic Academy. Ted reacts with a shout, questioning how that's possible and calling the situation way too convenient. Unsurprised, Abel just rests his head on his hand and says he understands. He then reflects that if Lilith decides to do something, it'll be easy for her, since living so long makes a difference compared to ordinary humans. With that, the woman gets closer and whispers that she'll be there to support him as a professor from now on. The scene then shifts to the day before the academy's entrance ceremony. As they walk through the campus, Lilith points to a building and says that's the student dormitory. Abel looks at the structure and comments that it's pretty big. Lilith then explains that the academy has a 5-year system and is fully residential. Right after, she says her goodbyes, saying that as a new professor, she needs to do her rounds and has a lot of work to do. Abel thanks her, while Ted excitedly says goodbye, telling her he'll see her tomorrow. As they walk through the campus, Ted Langobard follows his master with an excited smile on his face. Upon reaching the dormitory entrance, Abel turns and asks him if he couldn't have brought less luggage. Suddenly, a voice interrupts them, stating that they must be the new students. The woman then introduces herself as Fedir, a professor and the one in charge of the first-year building. Abel recognizes her from the entrance exam, much to the surprise of Ted, who didn't know she was a professor. With that, Fedir identifies them as Abel-kun and Ted-kun and hands them the academy-issued clothes. She explains that they're free to wear whatever they want inside the dorm, but they must wear the uniform when they go out. As he holds the uniform, Abel notices something different and takes a closer look. He then questions her, asking if this uniform isn't enchanted. The professor confirms that he noticed and explains that the outfit is enchanted with magic and dirt resistance. Abel then asks who performed the enchantment, and she replies that it must have been a contractor assigned by the academy. Fedir instructs them to get their keys at the reception, informing them they're free until tomorrow's ceremony. Right after, the two walk down the hall toward their respective rooms. Standing in front of his door, the boy looks at the uniform in his bag with a thoughtful expression. From the next door, Ted peeks out and asks if his master is interested in the uniform. While analyzing the uniform, Abel reflects that enchantment magic is a specialty of the black-eyed mages. He continues, recalling that this magic can enhance the properties of objects. With that, the boy concludes that the work on the uniform is, at best, third-rate, and a waste of materials. Abel then declares to a confused Ted that he will re-enchant it. Right after, he decides he might as well borrow Ted's uniform too. The boy then begins to imbue the outfit with new magic, covering it with runes. As soon as he finishes, Ted puts on the newly enchanted uniform. With a surprised expression, the boy exclaims that his body feels incredibly light. Abel comments that maybe because the original material was good, he managed to re-enchant it faster than he thought. With the first one done, he decides it's now time to take care of his own uniform. Ted then announces that, in that case, he'll use his for a manju diplomacy mission. He confirms with enthusiasm, showing a box that was in his bags. Opening the box, the boy reveals the Snowball Man juice, a specialty of the Langobard family. Abel questions if all that luggage was for the sweets, while Ted encourages him to try one. After trying it, the boy comments that for something so renowned, the taste is just average, and he's never heard of its fame in the 2 years he's lived in the area. With the box in hand, Ted explains that he's handing out the sweets to the neighbors. After all, the boy declares with determination that he plans to make 100 friends. With that, he says goodbye and runs out of the room to start his mission. Alone, Abel reflects that when it comes to Ted, maybe he really can make 100 friends. He then concludes that, if possible, all he wants is to graduate in peace. With that thought, the boy begins to apply his own enchantment magic to his uniform. As soon as he finishes the adjustments, he looks at the enchanted outfit on the bed. Feeling tired, he decides to take a nap, since enchantment magic consumes a lot of energy. Suddenly, a shout of "preposterous" from the hallway wakes him from his rest. Outside, a student shouts angrily, questioning if they're trying to insult them. Ted, confused, replies that it wasn't an insult and that he just wanted to make friends. Abel then opens the door and asks what's wrong, questioning if his manju diplomacy failed. Another student then turns to Ted and yells for him to dream on. The group's leader continues, asking who would want to be friends with someone as filthy as a poisonous perch. Hearing the term, Abel repeats the phrase "poisonous perch" to himself thoughtfully. The group leader then insults him, calling him a disgusting, venomous perch. Ted stands silent for a moment, unsure how to react to the insult. Watching from the doorway, Abel remembers reading about the term in his books. The venomous perch, in fact, refers to an invasive freshwater fish species whose population exploded in urban rivers. With its strong reproductive abilities and omnivorous nature, the species apparently disrupted the country's river ecosystem. Despite the hostility, Ted tries to compose himself and continue with his friendly approach. He then offers the boy a manju, asking him to try it, saying it's a flavor from his hometown he's proud of. However, the student shouts for him to shut up and slaps the sweet treat out of Ted's hand. As the manju falls to the floor, the aggressor curses him again, saying that he stinks. Ted just watches, shocked, at the sweet now on the hallway floor. From his doorway, Abel watches the scene, thinking how terrible it is. He then wonders if those guys weren't taught not to waste food. With that, the boy starts to consider if maybe he should intervene. Suddenly, as Ted bends down to pick up the sweet, a voice interrupts him saying, "If you insist." To everyone's surprise, Eliza crouches down and says she'll take one. With one bite, Eliza starts eating the manju she picked up from the floor. The action leaves everyone else completely shocked, while Ted just watches her, stunned. After tasting it, the girl rates the sweet, saying she'd give it about 70 points. She then comments that it's not bad, but she wishes it had a more unique local flavor. The group of boys reacts with disgust, shouting that she ate something off the floor, and that's why they hate venomous perches. With an annoyed look, Eliza turns to them and asks what they just said. Watching the scene, Abel thinks that the situation is bad and that he has no idea what Eliza might do. With that, he decides to step in and tells them to drop it, much to the group leader's surprise. Ted then tries to de-escalate the situation, saying it's fine and that he doesn't mind. The boy also thanks Eliza for her help, but she questions him, asking if he has any pride. Embarrassed, Ted replies that it's not really like that, scratching his head. Abel then reflects that he understands the situation, recalling that Lilith had mentioned something about discrimination among the nobility. He recalls that the academy has internal students who came from a preparatory school. In addition, there are also the external students who passed the entrance exams. With that, the boy concludes that venomous perches must be a derogatory term for external students. One of the students then asks about the so-called master that Ted keeps mentioning. The group leader immediately asks if it's the one with the inferior eyes. The implication of having a magicless inferior eye as a master leaves Ted completely shocked. At this, the boy explodes and yells for them to stop bad-mouthing his master. The sudden outburst catches the attention of Eliza and the others in the hallway. Abel just watches the scene unfold in silence. Right after, Ted lunges forward and grabs the group leader by the collar. His face full of rage, he demands that the boy apologize. The student, however, just tells him to let go, calling him disgusting. Ted glares at the aggressor in silence, not letting go of his collar. He then remembers when he met Abel, laughing and pointing at his amber-colored eyes. Back then, the boy exclaimed it was the first time he'd seen chick eyes. Suddenly, the group leader punches Ted in the face. As he's pushed back, Ted tries to call out for his master. Abel remains still, watching the assault in silence. The student yells that he's disgusted by him, calling him a pest fish and demanding he let go. One of the other students then approaches and tries to break up the fight, telling Ted to let go of his friend. Watching the scene, the boy wonders if he's mocking them, since Ted wasn't even fazed by the punch. Eliza also watches it all, surprised by her classmate's resilience. Suddenly, a magical aura surrounds the aggressor's hands as he prepares an attack. The blow hits Ted head-on, but the magic ricochets and strikes the aggressor and his companions. The girl watches, shocked, as the three boys are thrown back by the force of the impact. The group leader hits the floor with a thud, groaning in pain from the counterattack. The other two are also knocked down, unable to understand what happened. Lying on the floor, the boy wonders what is happening. Ted and Eliza, in turn, just watch the scene, completely confused by the outcome. Abel then explains that the enchantment he placed on Ted's uniform has been activated. He continues, revealing that it's a simple physical reflection enchantment that only reacts to violent stimuli. With a smile, the boy concludes that, although simple, it seems to have been quite effective against that group. The group leader then gets up and yells that they'll remember this, while Abel just comments on the cliché parting line. Abel reflects that, judging by skills alone, Ted is superior to them and hopes they appreciate that the situation didn't escalate into a brawl. Ted, for his part, remains silent for a moment, processing what just happened. Right after, he turns to his master and excitedly says that those guys just went flying without him doing anything. The boy then asks if it isn't amazing and if his inner power has finally awakened. Abel, however, denies the theory, stating that all of them, including Ted, were very low level. Suddenly, Eliza approaches and asks to take a look at his uniform. She then expresses her disbelief, saying it's the first time she's seen such a well-made enchantment. Proudly, Ted reveals that his master made it and that he seems to be good with enchantment magic too. Immediately, Abel grabs Ted and covers his mouth, ordering him not to say anything unnecessary. After telling him to be quiet, the girl turns to Abel and asks if he was the one who made the enchantment. Ignoring the girl's protests, Abel simply grabs Ted and drags him away. Eliza is still processing the revelation, wondering how Abel could cast that enchantment, and noticing the number of magic formulas on his uniform wasn't normal. As he's being dragged away, Ted asks why they're running and if Abel is shy, but is only told to be quiet. The girl remains standing in the hallway, silently watching them go. Suddenly, she remembers she came to invite them on a tour of the dorm, but completely forgot to mention it. The scene then shifts to the day of the entrance ceremony, showing one of the academy's tall towers. Inside, two students are desperately running down a long hallway. Abel laments the situation, saying they've barely started and they're already late for the entrance ceremony. Ted apologizes, explaining he couldn't sleep well because of the change in pillows, surprising Abel with his delicate side. Exhausted, the two finally reach an imposing door, relieved to have made it in time. While catching his breath, Abel looks up, observing the architecture around him. Confused, Ted turns and asks his master what's wrong. He then approaches the door, revealing that it's integrated with a magic formula. With a glance, the boy begins to analyze the enchantment's runes. Soon he understands the situation and concludes it's a welcoming gesture for the new students. Abel then turns and tells Ted he'll open the door, but that Ted must go in first. Not understanding, Ted is confused by it all. Ted then asks, scared, if the door gives electric shocks to late students. Abel reassures him, saying he'll understand once they're inside, as Ted protests that he's still not ready. Ignoring his protests, the boy simply shoves him inside, stating that it's no big deal. From the push, Ted stumbles and falls to the floor as he enters the room. He is then faced with toy soldiers that begin to play their instruments. The unexpected scene leaves the boy completely surprised and speechless. Right behind him, Abel enters and closes the door, commenting that whoever came up with this has strange taste. The hall lights up, revealing a grand celebration with music, confetti, and dozens of dolls. Completely lost, Ted shouts, not understanding what any of it is. Abel, in turn, calmly replies that it's nothing special. He then explains that it's a simple enchantment that activates a mechanism. The magic simply responds to the magical power of the one who opens the door, activating the reception. Impressed, Ted looks at the galleries full of dolls while someone in the crowd comments on the blonde. One of the students comments, impressed, that he activated all the door's sound sculptures. He continues, wondering if they're witnessing a once-in-a-decade talent, since even the Knight's March started playing. From the middle of the crowd, Eliza just silently watches the scene unfold. Abel, however, analyzes the situation, considering the clever arrangement and thinking that developing such contraptions could be interesting. Meanwhile, other students comment on the blonde being an external student, while the amber-eyed guy next to him must just be a sidekick. Elsewhere, the instructors observe him and declare him a true genius, who stands out among the freshmen. Ted then turns to his master and says that was amazing, and Abel just reminds him that he just explained how it worked. Suddenly, a voice from above comments that it seems they'll have the chance to hear the Knight's March this year. The man then introduces himself as Mikhail, the academy's headmaster, and asks everyone for silence. Right after, he congratulates the freshmen on their admission, while applause echoes through the hall. Sitting in the audience, Abel observes his surroundings. He then calculates that there's a considerable number of students, estimating about 200 in each grade. Beside him, Ted leans in and asks if his master already knew something. With that, the boy reveals that the headmaster is a descendant of Roy, the wind hero, who defeated the Sovereign. Abel then reflects that it's been a while since he last heard the name Roy. As the headmaster gives his speech, Abel remembers that he and Roy were part of the same group 200 years ago. Together, they fought to subdue the Sovereign, and to Abel, Roy was like a younger brother. The boy just watches the headmaster from a distance, lost in his memories of the past. Ted then informs him that the information was in the pamphlet, but Abel replies that he didn't read it, as he wasn't interested. Afterward, the ceremony continued with the headmaster's long speech. There was the introduction of the new teachers, including Lilith, and the presentation of the school's philosophy. For Abel, however, it was all just a boring and meaningless waste of time. After the ceremony, the two walk down the hallway toward their classroom, Class A. Ted then turns and asks his master if he's okay, noticing that he seems a little off. Abel denies it, saying it's nothing and just keeps walking. Suddenly, his eyes widen with an unexpected realization. He stops walking, causing Ted to call out to him, worried. With that, the boy realizes he's feeling a strange gaze on him. The sensation isn't coming from a living being, and he wonders if it could be a regalia or if someone has discovered his true identity. Suddenly, Abel feels a strange gaze coming from somewhere. Then, he wonders if someone might have discovered his true identity. Abel then realizes the magical power of whoever's watching him is weak, as if they're using a regalia or something similar. Nearby, a student asks his classmate if that was the same blonde boy he had faced before. Indignant, the green-haired boy questions what the other just said. He claims it was just the enchantment that threw them, but the girl beside him doubts charm magic can do that. Eliza then recalls that everyone saw the doors resonating at the entrance ceremony and bets that it's connected. At that moment, someone steps forward in the room. Ted Langobard then pulls Abel by the arm, bringing him to the center of attention. As soon as they reach the front, all eyes in the room turn to the two of them. While Ted comments on the tension in the air, Abel replies that he finds this situation quite common. The green-haired boy just watches the scene in silence. From their seats, two other students watch everything intently. Suddenly, a new person enters the classroom. A student reacts in shock, unable to believe the Class A advisor is that person. With a thud, the professor places his books on the desk. A student then shouts, "Professor Emerson!" With a wink, the man confirms that he's correct, to the astonishment of the entire class. A shocked Ted also turns, shouting, "Emerson?" Then Abel asks if he's famous, and Ted confirms that he is. He then explains that they're talking about a candidate for executive of the Kronos Magic Society, known as the strongest mage of the modern era. At this, Abel remembers that he's the man frequently mentioned in modern magical engineering texts. He then concludes that for a mage of this era, Emerson seems rather competent. Next, Ted mentions the rumor that he was responsible for the magical engineering section of the written exam. Upon hearing this, he understands why the test was so hard, while Abel finally grasps the situation. The professor then announces that he'll skip roll call and introduces himself as Emerson, the teacher in charge of Class A. Abel notices that, on top of everything, the professor's hair is a mess. He also notices his shirt is untucked, giving him a sloppy appearance. With this, he thinks that Emerson doesn't seem like a proper adult, but ponders that talented mages often have internal flaws. A student then raises her hand and questions him, saying she heard he'd be too busy with his research to teach. The professor confirms that she's right, and that, honestly, he's only interested in his own research. When the student asks why he's acting as a professor, Emerson explains that the title just makes it easier to get government funding. He then reveals the reason is that there's something he wants to check. With his gaze fixed on Abel, the professor says there might be something he wants to observe in this class. Emerson continues to stare at the boy with a subtle smile. Suddenly, Abel recognizes it's the same gaze he felt before. With a smile, the professor adds that the details of what he's looking for are a secret. Abel remains silent, just observing the situation. Despite a sinister feeling in the air, Abel's school life had begun. His routine consisted of classes in the morning. Then, he would spend some time reading in the library after school. Afterward, he'd return to the dorm for a bath at night. Then, he would continue reading a bit more before bed. Occasionally, Abel found time to talk with Lilith, considering his routine to be satisfactory. However, he admits that if he had to point out a problem, there was one. That problem was the fact that the classes were unbearably boring. Meanwhile, Ted complains to himself that the level of the classes at Asura Magic Academy is insanely high. Abel, however, finds the classes terribly boring and pointless, so he uses the time to advance his own magical research. With this, he thinks that with just a pen and paper, he can do his research anywhere. Suddenly, the white-haired professor notices something in the class. Then, he calls on Mr. Abel and challenges him to solve the problem on the board. The professor then thinks about the boy's audacity for not paying attention in his class with those inferior eyes. Even though he knows he's been caught, Abel finds it ridiculous that the professor is trying to publicly embarrass him. As he stands up, he thinks about the professor's attitude. In front of the board, Abel reflects that since the answer the professor is looking for might be different from his, he should at least make it easy for everyone to understand. Quickly, he starts writing the solution on the board. With the answer complete, he explains that the magic formula can be simplified in at least 10 steps using existing shorthand. Seeing the solution, the professor is completely shocked. Ted thinks that, although he shouldn't say anything since he wasn't paying attention either, he'd like a class that was actually for the students. Angrily, the professor grinds his teeth and just tells Abel to sit down. As he walks back to his seat, Abel thinks to himself that the professor is a show-off. Disdainfully, a classmate clicks his tongue, calling him a show-off. Then, another student criticizes him for being the blonde's lackey and a lower eye, questioning the point of studying magic. Despite the comments, Abel decides to simply ignore the taunts. It is then revealed that the Asura Magic Academy has 5 libraries, and the Grand Library holds a vast collection of books. However, since the main location is always crowded, Abel just borrows the books from there. He then reads them in the smaller libraries, figuring the extra effort is worth it. Suddenly, a voice comments on the coincidence and catches his attention. Eliza then appears and remarks that he is also studying there. Confused, he asks what she means by her surprise, stating that libraries are good for focusing. She then asks him about his homework, and Abel replies that he does it all in his room. He then adds that he only needs a few minutes before bed to finish, leaving her surprised. As Abel continues to write, Eliza moves closer to observe his notes. She then points to a specific part of the problem he's solving. Eliza remains silent for a moment, analyzing what he wrote. Soon, she advises him, saying the problem involves 2 formulas, and he should consider the first and last parts separately. In silence, Abel turns the page of the book he's reading. Eliza just watches the scene with a surprised expression. With that, Abel begins to explain the problem. Following his logic, Eliza points to the notebook and asks if the solution would look like that. Abel then realizes she's quick, with 100 times Ted's adaptability and comprehension. As they walk at dusk, Eliza thanks Abel, commenting that his explanation was very easy to understand. Then she asks if he usually spends all his time reading books in the library. Confused, Abel asks if that's weird, and she says no, but she has a question. Eliza then continues, asking why, living in the city, he never goes out. She argues that there's a lot to experience outside of school, giving a few examples. As soon as she mentions restaurants, fruits, and sweets, Abel comments that she only mentioned food. Eliza insists there's more than that, like secondhand bookstores, which catches his attention. She then explains that in those places, you can find cheap and rare books, which makes Abel ponder. He then reflects that he would, in fact, like to visit the bookstores of the current era. With a smile, Eliza suggests they go out together on their next day off so she can thank him. As soon as Abel replies that he doesn't mind, Eliza celebrates that their outing is set. With that, she sighs, relieved she managed to convince him. Then, the group of students Abel faced before appears, mocking Master Kun. The trio then takes an intimidating stance, blocking their path. Unfazed, Abel simply asks if he can help them with something. The blue-haired student retorts, telling him to stop showing off and acting so superior. Next, he accuses him of using money to get into the academy, questioning how a lower eye was admitted. Smirking, the green-haired boy draws his weapon and says that's why they're going to redo his entrance exam for him. He then taunts him, asking what Abel will do today without Ted to protect him. Beside them, Eliza reacts with surprise, recognizing the weapon is a regalia. Abel then cuts her off and asks why they despise external students so much. The boy grinds his teeth, questioning Abel's audacity for asking such a question. Angrily, he yells that it's about knowing your place and that passing the exam doesn't make you equals. He then vents that while they dedicated years to their studies, Abel just showed up acting like he owns the place. Brandishing his weapon, the student declares that this whole situation is just irritating. After hearing the explanation, Abel acknowledges their dedication and then says he has a question. Suddenly, he throws his bag into the air. In a swift move, Abel lunges forward and asks if they plan to fight with such inferior equipment. The trio of students is left completely shocked and speechless at his speed. Beside them, Eliza watches the whole scene with an astonished expression. By the time the student realizes it, Abel is already holding his regalia, and he wonders when the boy took it. With the weapon in hand, Abel asks if they usually maintain their regalias. He then explains that the material degradation has caused distortions in the weapon's magical structure. Then, he tosses the regalia back, saying that if they want to be mages, they should take care of their tools of the trade. As the student falls to the ground, Abel asks Eliza to get his bag so they can leave. The boy remains on the ground, paralyzed by humiliation. Angrily, he punches the ground while muttering Ted's and Abel's names. He then yells that he'll make sure to embarrass them both and that they should just wait for tomorrow's class. Hearing the threat, Abel wonders what they're planning for the next class. Ted Langobard excitedly shouts that it's finally time for PE class and that he's totally pumped. Beside Eliza, Abel just watches the scene and thinks about how intense the boy is. Abel then reflects that since they only have PE once every 7 days, he can understand the excitement. Soon, he notices that everyone has already gathered in the courtyard. The teacher then introduces himself as Cantor, the PE instructor, and says that some of the prep students might already know him. With that, he announces that today they'll be playing Hound, and as Ted asks what that is, Eliza also admits she doesn't know. As soon as Cantor starts explaining the game, the green-haired student interrupts him, saying they already know the rules. The professor just laughs and says that they're not understanding the situation. With a smile, he explains that the class adapts for those who are unfamiliar or unable to participate. The green-haired student then agrees, commenting that the outsiders require more effort. Realizing the professor's intention, Ted and Eliza become alert. Eliza, however, smiles defiantly, saying she'll teach those troublesome outsiders a lesson. As Ted cheers her on, Abel thinks that although he's used to being treated like a failure, it must be hard for them. The professor then announces he's going to divide the teams and will call out the names for the split. Next, the students begin to group up, waiting for instructions. With his arms crossed, Abel just watches the teams being formed in silence. Soon, the final team is made up entirely of students from outside the academy. Ted Langobard then cheers excitedly, happy to be on the same team as his friends. At this, Eliza calls him a carefree meatball, and he reacts, not understanding the nickname. She then explains that if he didn't notice, that makes him a meatball, since everyone on Team D are outsiders. Another teammate comments that the team's formation seems like a deliberate target. Hearing this, Ted finally understands the real situation they've been put in. Worried, a female student says she's always been terrible at sports, and her classmate agrees, stating he's better at intellectual tasks. As the others also admit their weaknesses, Abel thinks what an unreliable group this is. Eliza then tries to cheer up her classmate, but she expresses her fear, since the students from inside don't look on them kindly. With determination, Eliza states that for that very reason, they'll fight fair and make them eat their words. Abel, however, ponders that their opponents are the type to stab you in the back, and that the match won't be easy. The green-haired student then approaches and wishes Master Kun a good game. Then, he adds with a smile that he'll make up for what happened the day before. In the background, Professor Cantor watches the interaction with a malicious smile. Abel then realizes that even the PE teacher seems to be in on the plan. Next, the professor announces the start of the match between Team B and Team D. It is then explained that Haunt is a game where the attackers, or shooters, form a team of 3. Another member of the opposing team observes the field seriously. The bluish-haired student also prepares for the start of the match. Meanwhile, the defenders, or rabbits, are divided into 2 teams that take turns in 5-minute rounds. The shooters use a shooting glove-type regalia to launch energy projectiles. The projectiles come in 3 types, one of them being a spear specialized for speed. Another type of projectile is the spherical one, which has a more balanced power. Lastly, there's also the disc type, which is easier to maneuver in the air. The shooter's objective is to hit the rabbits and take them down. Meanwhile, the rabbits must focus on dodging the projectiles. Just as Ted comments that it looks like dodgeball, it's revealed that the team with the most survivors wins. He then completes his thought saying it's a game where they're divided between offense and defense. Abel then watches Ted dodge a projectile and thinks that's to be expected from that loud kid. Abel then deduces he must have reacted to the vibration in the air produced by the launch. Right after, one of his teammates is hit square on by a projectile. With that, Abel watches his fallen teammate, realizing he's been hit and is out of the game. He then reflects that attributeless magic might have low power and not be lethal. However, he knows that even so, magic is still magic. Ted manages to block an attack, but realizes that without using body enhancement magic to defend, the impact will still hurt a bit. In an agile move, Eliza manages to dodge one of the projectiles. Suddenly, Abel finds himself surrounded by 2 projectiles heading his way. He then thinks how surprising it is that they're attacking so directly. As he ducks, the 2 projectiles end up swerving away from him. He realizes that 2 other projectiles were launched at his teammates. With no chance to react, both are hit at the same time, to everyone's surprise. Eliza watches the scene in shock, unable to believe what just happened. With a serious expression, Abel starts to suspect those guys are up to something. In the distance, the opposing trio gathers, with the green-haired boy adjusting his glove confidently. Outraged by the situation, Eliza yells at the opposing team. She then accuses them directly, questioning if they're not cheating. With that, Abel realizes that Eliza had also noticed the irregularity. He then understands that within that non-attribute magic, they had added a target tracking syntax. This meant that the shooting glove they prepared had been illegally modified for the match. The green-haired student then tells her to stop talking nonsense and provokes her, asking if she has any proof. Furious with the insult, Eliza yells and asks what he just said. Suddenly, Abel holds her back to stop her from lunging at the opponent. He then explains that distracting an opponent with words is one of the fundamentals of battle. So, he warns her to focus, as they're also shooting from the sides. With a flushed face, Eliza can only thank Abel for his help. Abel then reflects that while watching the match, he found some interesting people. He continues his thought, noting the potential of some of the players. Suddenly, a teammate yells a warning to Eliza, telling her there's an attack coming from behind. With the warning, Eliza manages to dive to the ground just in time to dodge the attack. She then thanks Yukari for the warning, and her teammate congratulates her for doing a good job. Abel then observes Yukari, noticing that although she was a bit timid at first, she was showing a surprising amount of effort in the match. As Yukari warns Ted about an attack, Abel reflects that despite her lack of physical skill, she is calm and has a broad view of the game. He then concludes that if they can fix her weak personality, she could become an excellent mage. Suddenly, a movement on the field catches Abel's attention. Several projectiles are fired simultaneously in Yukari's direction. With no chance to escape, she's hit head-on by all the attacks. From the impact, the girl is thrown forcefully to the ground. Worried, Ted shouts Yukari's name as he sees her fall. Eliza also reacts in shock, screaming her teammate's name. With this, Abel realizes they focus focused on the team's spotter and admits that, at least, they used their heads. The green-haired student then boasts, yelling that she's a nuisance and that the slow ones should get off the field. Lying on the ground, Yukari just laments her defeat. With her face wounded, Yukari tries to get up, but is hit again. Another teammate is also hit and eliminated from the game. Eliza and Ted watch the scene, shocked and not understanding the opponent's aggressiveness. Angrily, Eliza turns to them and asks what they are doing. The green-haired student replies with a smirk, asking what she means. His teammate then adds that they're just removing some invasive species. Seeing a new attack, Ted yells for them to wait, but it's too late. Yukari is hit once more, falling to the ground while screaming in pain. While running to help, Eliza screams for them to stop since Yukari was already down. The student then argues that there's no rule against attacking a fallen rabbit, as the game is still on. Taking advantage of the distraction, the opponent attacks her directly, saying her guard was wide open. From the impact, Eliza is thrown to the ground, and Ted screams her name. Abel then reflects that one of Eliza's weaknesses is getting carried away by her emotions too quickly. Then, Ted stands up and shouts an objection, getting the professor's attention. He then points at the professor, insisting that attacks shouldn't count, and asking if he didn't see it. Before he can finish his sentence, Ted is hit by a projectile and cries out in pain. From the impact, he's thrown to the ground, and Eliza yells his nickname, Pudge! Abel sighs, thinking that sometimes the hunter becomes the prey. The green-haired student then mocks them, saying it seems the outsiders are all useless. With a smirk, he continues the taunt, asking why they don't act like it and go back to the gutter where they belong. Lying on the ground, Eliza and Ted just endure the humiliation. Nearby, Yukari cowers, intimidated by the situation. Abel remains silent, just watching the match unfold. After just 2 minutes of play, only one rabbit is left on their team. Abel then positions himself alone in the center of the court, as the last survivor. The opponents prepare for the final attack against him. With a victorious smile, the green-haired boy asks how they should get rid of this last opponent. Abel just stares down the trio with a serious and determined expression. The green-haired student then yells that there's only one target left, preparing for the final attack. With that, he orders everyone to crush him, and his teammates fire their projectiles simultaneously. Several energy attacks then fly toward Abel, who remains standing in the center of the court. Even though he thinks it'd be less trouble to let them win, Abel decides he won't just stand by after they've gone this far. He then moves quickly, dodging the first projectile with ease. With an agile spin, Abel manages to escape another attack coming his way. As the opponents keep firing, one of them yells for him to take all the attacks at once. From the sidelines, Ted and Eliza shout words of encouragement, telling him to dodge everything. The green-haired boy laughs hysterically as he continues to fire at Abel non-stop. Soon, out of breath, he questions if Abel shouldn't be breathless by now. Completely calm, Abel simply replies that he isn't. He then thinks that, actually, they're the ones out of breath now. One of the opponents announces there's only 1 minute left, to the trio's leader's astonishment. Realizing he has no other choice, the green-haired boy decides to use one last strategy. Together, the three of them prepare a powerful combined attack to end the match. Abel looks up, surprised by what's about to happen. Soon, a shower of colorful energy projectiles rains down on him. Desperate, Eliza and Ted scream Abel's name, fearing the worst. He then realizes they've added a scatter syntax to the projectiles, breaking the rules, of course. While the green-haired student boasts that he can't dodge, Abel thinks that, in fact, he can. However, he considers that doing so would be too flashy and would reveal his abilities. With that, Abel decides that what he's about to do will also be a violation of the rules. He then concludes he has no other choice, since they were the ones who started cheating. With full authorization, Abel activates his counter magic to protect himself. To disguise it, he sits down and pretends to be in trouble as a magical barrier shields him from all the attacks. On the sidelines, his teammates watch the scene completely stunned and speechless. The opponents are also shocked, not understanding what just happened. With his glove failing, the green-haired student wonders if his regalia is broken. The professor then ends Team B's attack phase, blowing the whistle to end the turn. Soon, his teammates run over to congratulate him, impressed that he managed to survive alone. As soon as Ted starts celebrating, Abel tells him to shut up, reminding him that he's the only survivor. Abel then realizes they need to annihilate the opposing team in the next attack. With that, he knows it will be their defeat if they can't win now. Ted then confidently declares that they're going to win this match. Next, Eliza also gets ready, stating she'll show her true skills to rally the team. Abel then thinks it would be great if just the two of them could take out the opposing team. The opposing leader scoffs at their excitement, commenting that they're just pointlessly encouraging each other. With that, one of the players yells he's going to destroy those sewer dwellers, making Abel suspect they have a plan. The professor then blows the whistle, starting the second phase of the match. Immediately, the opposing leader orders his team to use the phalanx formation. Then, all the players gather in a compact defensive formation. Ted then fires a projectile, yelling that grouped up like that, they're just one big target. Eliza also attacks, declaring she'll crush them all at once. The projectiles, however, are blocked by the opposing team's defensive formation. Suddenly, one of the opposing players yells that a spear projectile is coming. Next, another player warns about a disc-type projectile coming from the southeast. With the warning, the team manages to block the attack, and Abel finally understands their strategy. A third player then announces the arrival of a spherical projectile from the west. Abel then realizes that by using everyone to monitor the directions, they're sharing information and eliminating blind spots. While Ted shouts for Abel to help, since their attacks aren't reaching, he just admires the true phalanx formation. Eliza also gets frustrated, complaining that her attacks aren't working even though her magic power is stronger. With a slight smile, Abel admits to himself that they have good teamwork. The opposing leader then taunts him, saying he can't seem to even manage a pincer attack. With disdain, Abel replies that's just the basics, and then calls for Ted. He then asks Ted to come closer for a second, leaving him surprised by the call. Abel tells Ted that he will be their key. From a distance, the green-haired boy watches the two of them whispering, and suddenly, they look at him. With his eyes glowing, Ted begins to recite an incantation. He then raises his arm and invokes, "Holy spears, descend from the heavens." The opposing team watches on, clueless as to what's happening. Abel then continues the chant. Hearing this, Ted turns and asks what's with the long chant. Unfazed, Abel says it doesn't matter and keeps concentrating. Then, Ted holds out his hand and recites, "Gather in my hand." With his eyes fixed on the target, he yells, "Unleash the power of the abominable void." Calmly, Abel whispers the keyword, "Russet." As soon as Ted shouts the final command, "Tempest," a powerful energy is released. The opposing team looks up at the sky, confused by what's coming. Suddenly, one of the players shouts and everyone turns to the surprise that awaits them. A shower of golden energy spears then rains down on them, and they scream in pain and surprise. The impact knocks down all the players on the opposing team at once. The team leader can only lament his defeat as he watches the attack's aftermath. In a final blow, the opposing team's leader is hit squarely and cries out in pain. With all the players down, the professor watches the outcome of the match in complete silence. With no other option, he raises his arm and declares Team D the grand winner. Celebrating, Eliza shouts at the top of her lungs that they've won. Beside her, the other team members also celebrate the unexpected result. Eliza then congratulates Ted, asking why he didn't use that power before, leaving him at a loss for words. With an awkward smile, he replies that it was just a fluke. Abel watches the scene, thinking that with all the attention on Ted, everything worked out perfectly. The green-haired student gets up from the ground, lamenting his humiliating defeat. He then wonders how he could have lost to an outsider, feeling completely defeated. Abel then approaches and says that, although he doesn't know how hard they worked, there's something he needs to understand. He continues, explaining that at the very least, the reason Ted was able to stay in the game was due to his skill and the result of his own efforts, leaving his opponent speechless. As Ted celebrates, Abel reflects that while he can't give him all the credit since the last move was his, he acknowledges his worth. He then remembers how hard Ted studied and trained for that entrance exam. Abel then finishes, saying that he saw all the effort he put in to get there. With his head down, the green-haired student just clenches his fists in silence. Suddenly, Ted holds out his hand to him in a gesture of friendship. With a smile, he says that yesterday's enemy is today's ally, and invites him to eat manju together. In the background, Abel just watches, thinking how Ted is still hung up on the manju idea. The green-haired student stares at the outstretched hand, still reluctant to accept the offer. Even with the rejection, Ted doesn't give up and insists on being friends. Eliza then asks what his problem is, since even Acorn apologized. With a smile, Ted comments that, at least this time, he didn't slap his hand away. He then optimistically concludes that this is already a step forward in their friendship. The team then calls him hopeless, but Ted encourages them to aim high for his goal of 100 friends. Abel just watches the scene with a slight smile and his arms crossed. At dusk, the Academy's towers stand out against the sky. In a luxurious hallway, an imposing figure walks toward a room. The mysterious figure then climbs a flight of stairs, approaching their destination. The figure then approaches a double door at the end of the hallway. With a touch, he uses his magic to open the sealed door. Upon entering, the man curiously looks around the room. He then comments that there are more things here than before. From his desk, Professor Emerson apologizes for the mess and invites him in, calling him Mr. Headmaster. The headmaster, a man with a long white beard, just observes the place in silence. Next, he points to one of the screens and comments to Emerson that it seems he's been watching the same scene repeatedly. The professor then explains that it's a video captured by a spy drone he developed. In the recording, Ted appears concentrating his energy and shouting to release his power. Right after, the video shows the powerful explosion of energy he unleashed. Shocked by what he saw, the headmaster asks what that was, and Emerson asks if he noticed it too. With a smile, the professor states that it's an incredible disguised magic and that few people would notice it. He then explains that it seems Abel Kuhn is the one behind it, as he discreetly moves his mouth in the recording. With his eyes fixed on the screen, Emerson declares that he will uncover his true identity. Eliza invites him out on their next day off as a way to thank him. Finally, the promised day with Eliza arrived, and Abel sees it as a good opportunity to learn about the culture of the current era. Suddenly, he notices someone's presence in the room. Looking toward the front desk, he finds Lilith organizing some papers. As soon as he asks if she's the one in charge today, she greets him with surprise. With a smile, she asks if he's going to the library again and hands him a piece of paper. Upon reading it, Abel realizes it's an exit permit and informs her he's heading into town. Lilith then grips the paper tightly, visibly upset. Next, she asks him if he's going with Eliza-san. She then comments that she received a similar permit from a student named Eliza a while ago. Abel asks if there's a problem, and she replies that it's nothing. With a jealous look, Lilith slightly crumples the permit in her hands. Then, she turns away and tells him to have fun, leaving him confused by her reaction. After he leaves, Lilith remains silent, stewing over her feelings. Just as Abel is about to leave, she calls out to him one more time. Suddenly, Lilith grabs him by the sleeve, stopping him from leaving. With a pleading look, she asks him to go out with her again sometime. Abel just watches her in silence, surprised by the unexpected request. Faced with her insistence, he simply replies yes. Hearing his answer, Lilith breaks into a radiant, happy smile. Before leaving, Abel thinks to himself that she has a cute side after all. He then reflects that even though she's lived for 200 years, she sometimes shows a childish face. In a memory, Lilith whispers that she admires him from the bottom of her heart. As he leaves the room, Abel is left pondering what she said. He then wonders if that was meant as respect, while Eliza waits for him in the city. As soon as he finds her, he apologizes and asks if he made her wait long. With a smile, Eliza says no, and that she just got there. She then remarks, surprised, that even that Abel knows how to apologize, and he asks if that's so strange. Eliza replies that she was just a little surprised by his attitude. With an inviting gesture, she offers to be his guide through the royal capital for the day. Abel agrees to her proposal, saying he'll leave it to her since she seems familiar with the place. Next, Eliza announces their first stop is the ruined Memorial Clock Tower, which has an observation deck. Soon they climb the stairs, passing by the huge gears of the clock's mechanism. He then thinks about what an interesting machine it is, so elaborate and orderly. From the window, Eliza calls him over, telling him to come see the view. As he gets closer, she points to the landscape, saying you can see the ocean from there. From the top of the tower, the panoramic view of the city stretches out to meet the sea on the horizon. Suddenly, something in the landscape catches Abel's eye. Spotting a ship in the ocean, he asks what that is, leaving Eliza confused by the question. She then explains that it's a steamboat and questions why he doesn't know what it is. With that, Abel understands it's a ship that crosses the sea using magic stone fuel. He then concludes that if it can be seen so clearly from this distance, the boat must be very large. Eliza then thinks that just as she imagined, he understands things better when he sees the real object. With a slight smile, Abel thinks that this will be a good day for their outing. While watching him, Eliza seems to be pondering her impression of him. He then remembers how he learned the new culture of that era ahead of schedule. Next, he recalls a movie scene he watched with Eliza. Abel then reflects that this city is full of things he has no knowledge of. As they walk down the street, he points to a store and asks Eliza what that is. With a flashy sign, the place piques Abel's curiosity about what's inside. Unsure how to explain, Eliza tries to find the right words to describe the place. She then informs him it's called a game center, and he repeats the name, confused. She explains that it's a place where people spend their free time, but Abel interprets it as a place to burn money. He then ponders that with the era being so peaceful, entertainment culture has developed considerably. Curious, he says he's interested and suggests they go in, and Eliza agrees, admitting it's her first time too. As they head for the entrance, a spy drone watches them from a lamppost. The drone continues to monitor their movements, following them closely. Upon entering, they find themselves in a luxurious environment full of game machines. The place is filled with people having fun with various types of electronic games. Suddenly, Eliza spots other students from the academy in the crowd. She then confronts them, asking what the hell they think they're doing there. Suddenly, a magical skeleton appears behind Eliza, who turns around, startled. Upon seeing the creature, she starts screaming in terror. In a panic, Eliza clings to Abel, who just asks her to calm down. He then explains that it's just an imitation infused with magic, and she reacts with surprise. Embarrassed, Eliza steps back and apologizes, while Abel just watches her. The skeleton then says it's no big deal, as he's used to that reaction. But Eliza shouts that she wasn't talking to him. With that, the creature points to the game section and informs them that the roulette area is for adults only. Abel then realizes there are many strange and unfamiliar things in this place. Suddenly, Eliza points to a claw machine and calls out to him, asking if it's what she thinks it is. She then runs towards the machine, excited by what she's found. With a smile, she confirms that they're the minimum monsters. She then explains that she loves this series of plushies, and Abel repeats the name, confused. Eliza then reveals it's a collection of legendary magical beasts from the past, but in cuter versions. Enthusiastically, she says there are over 200 types, and the collection is gaining popularity among the city's youth. Abel just looks at the machine's claw, finally understanding what it is. Abel then understands why they look familiar, as he's fought some of them in the past. With her eyes sparkling, Eliza points to a plushie and says she loves that one, Jameis. Abel then reflects that while its appearance isn't something that would drive girls crazy, he thinks that guy would be very strong in a fight. Surprised by the comment, Eliza agrees, saying that Jameis was indeed strong. Abel then remembers how the creature's breath turned everything to stone, and that it was a difficult time. He continues the memory, explaining that the petrifying breath was a problem, and that they defeated it with wind magic. Eliza watches him in silence, not understanding what he's talking about. Realizing he's said too much, Abel scolds himself for being careless. He then thinks that he tends to ramble when it comes to strong enemies from the past. With a restrained laugh, he wonders how he's going to get out of this situation. Eliza then laughs and comments that even Abel tells those kinds of jokes, calling him weird. Relieved, Abel decides to just leave it at that and not explain any further. With a smile, Eliza asks if he thinks she's strange for liking the ones that look strong instead of the cute ones. Then she adds, questioning if she's not feminine enough. Abel just watches her in silence for a moment. With that, he states that it's natural for individuals to have different views from one another. He then says he thinks her preference is perfect, as what should be valued most is one's essence. Eliza just stares at him, surprised and touched by his words. With a blushing face, she thanks him and says that if he puts it that way, she can't disagree. Soon, she looks back at the plushie and says she's starting to like Jameis more and more, and Abel asks if she wants it. Embarrassed, Eliza replies that of course she wants it. She then points to the claw and says it's impossible, as there's no way that small thing can pick up such a large plushie. Abel looks at the machine and agrees that it does indeed seem impossible. Using his analytical eyes, he performs a structural analysis of the mechanism. With this, he realizes the claw's strength has been set to be very weak. He also notes that the operability of the controls has been intentionally impaired. Abel then comments on the unscrupulous business practices, leaving Eliza confused. He then says that at least he won't feel bad about what he's about to do, and she asks if he's going to try and get it. As he inserts a coin, Abel says that they are the ones who turned the possible into the impossible. With his hands on the controls, Abel states that mages are the ones who turn the impossible into the possible. He then clarifies that he isn't stealing the plushie as he's playing by the rules. With that, he thinks that he's already paid the specified amount in coins. With his eyes closed, Abel concentrates to activate his magic. He then opens his eyes, which glow with energy, and uses strengthening magic. The machine's claw is then enveloped in an aura of power, preparing to move. With its enhanced strength, the claw manages to firmly grip the Jameis plushie. Eliza watches the scene, dumbfounded, unable to believe he's actually doing it. The machine then announces that the prize has been successfully won. Abel then reflects that, after 200 years, his rematch with Jameis has ended in a monotonous way. The prize won, the plushie is finally released by the machine. He then bends down to get the plushie that fell into the prize chute. He then stands up and hands it to Eliza, asking if this was the one she wanted. Eliza just stares at him, still shocked and speechless at what he just did. With a smile, she finally takes the plushie, happy to have gotten the prize she wanted so much. With a blushing face, Eliza hugs the plushie and says that, for now, she'll accept it. Then, Abel hears her whisper that she'll cherish it, leaving him a bit confused. She then continues to hug the plushie in silence with an embarrassed smile. On the table, 2 plates of beautifully decorated pancakes are waiting to be eaten. With her cheeks full, Eliza exclaims how delicious the dessert is. As she eats, she tells Abel that the pancakes from this place are on another level. Then, Eliza asks if she can try a piece from his plate too. Abel then reflects that other people's food always looks more appealing, something that time hasn't changed. With that, he cuts a piece of his pancake and offers it to the girl, simply saying, "Here." Without hesitation, Eliza eats the piece offered directly from his fork. Right after, she praises the hint of dark chocolate and says that pancake is delicious too. Eliza then asks if Abel wants to try hers too, to which he agrees. So, she brings a fork with a piece of her strawberry pancake to his mouth. Even though he's not a fan of sweets, Abel admits he can eat these pancakes easily. Excited by his reaction, Eliza confirms she knew it and reveals that this is her favorite shop. Abel, however, comments that he finds it intriguing that she doesn't mind the situation, making her curious. Calmly, he explains that he read in a book about the act of putting your mouth where someone else's has already been. Then, Abel asks if that isn't called an indirect kiss, leaving Eliza completely embarrassed. Abel watches Eliza's reaction as he finishes chewing, wondering if she was so focused on the food that she didn't notice. Seeing her panic, he apologizes for saying something unnecessary, but Eliza stammers that's not the case. She then tries to play it off, saying that an indirect kiss is normal, and she's not worried about it at all. Abel then replies that he understands and that in that case, it's all fine. He observes how she seems very worried about the situation, but decides he should believe her words. After a moment, Abel takes a sip of his tea in silence. Calmly, he comments that the atmosphere of this street seems a bit different from the others. Surprised, Eliza asks if he felt the same way about the place. She adds that the street has a retro feel, but Abel replies that to him, it feels nostalgic. After a pause, Eliza calls his name. She then points out that there's a difference between finding a scene retro and finding it nostalgic, which surprises Abel. With that, Eliza directly asks who he is, mentioning his fight in the exam and the enchantment on his uniform. She finishes by stating that his abilities are far beyond the level of an average student. With Abel unable to answer, Eliza just stares at him in silence, waiting for an explanation. In his thoughts, Abel reflects that being a reincarnated mage from 200 years ago is a secret he only wants to share with Lilith. He concludes that if this information spreads, the risk of getting into trouble will only increase, and his only wish is to live in peace. Suddenly, a quick pan reveals a lamppost on the street. The focus then shifts to Abel's eyes as he notices something and decides that, either way, he should first take care of a small surveillance device hidden at the top of the lamppost. With that in mind, he leans forward and tells Eliza that being watched at school is one thing, but it's unpleasant to be observed even on holidays. Confused, Eliza just calls his name. Not understanding the situation, she asks what's wrong. In a sudden move, Abel leans over her, as if he's about to kiss her. The unexpected closeness sends Eliza into a complete panic. Hidden behind her, he points his finger and conjures a fireball with a projectile speed enhancement. The next instant, the lamppost on the street explodes, startling the girl. As a startled Eliza turns around, Abel moves away and comments that it was probably a malfunctioning lamppost, trying to get the conversation back on track. Eliza stares at him in silence, suspicious of his explanation. Soon her expression turns to one of visible disappointment. Abel simply replies that it's nothing and tells her to forget what he said. At that, Eliza apologizes for being nosy and asking so many questions. Not understanding her reaction, he just confirms that it's okay. In her thoughts, she begins to admit that she just doesn't want to feel like she's being left out by him. With a flushed face, she continues her reflection and realizes she's sure that she likes Abel, confirming for herself how she feels about him. As they walk back at sunset, he thinks that even after destroying the regalia, he still feels like he's being monitored. Given this, Abel concludes that it might be time to take some measures. The boy realizes this whole situation is becoming more and more of a nuisance. Suddenly, he stops and asks Eliza to go on ahead, which surprises her. He then explains that he forgot something at the last shop and needs to go back for it. Holding the bear she won, Eliza agrees with a smile and says that's fine. Then she says goodbye, telling him she'll see him tomorrow at school, and he thanks her. As soon as she walks away, Abel turns and quickly enters a dark alley. Landing on the stone ground, Abel plants himself in the middle of the alley. Next, he looks up and states that he knows someone is there. Calmly, the boy adds that he can feel the presence of two people. Then, he directly orders them both to come out of hiding. From the shadows, a sorceress emerges amidst a surge of energy and remarks that Abel understood their intentions. With a smile, she adds that he decided to let the girl go and that she adores smart kids like him. Abel then analyzes her and deduces that, having gray eyes, she uses this magic to blend into her surroundings. He also notices her revealing clothes are meant to increase the precision of her magic. Suddenly, a voice from above says he never thought a brat could notice their presence. The same voice then comments that for a child to have noticed them, it seems they've found a real monster. Then, a man leaps from the roof, landing in the alley with great force. Upon seeing the emerald eyes, Abel immediately identifies him as a wind element mage. The newcomer then praises Abel, saying that, as expected of someone recognized by him, the boy has great talent. Intrigued, Abel repeats the mention of someone having recognized him. He then asks who sent them and what their purpose is here. The sorceress then scolds her partner for his big mouth, saying he's always talking too much. The man apologizes to Abel, but states that, despite everything, they are still professionals. Then, he unsheathes his dagger, which glows with wind energy. His partner then declares they won't reveal their client, not even on their deathbed. With a subtle smile, Abel comments that an opponent like that only makes him more motivated for the coming fight. The scene then shifts to Emerson's memories, where he reflects on how in this world, no human would bother fighting an insect. Likewise, no one would try to discuss the stars with a monkey. For him, someone he could talk to about magic as an equal was something that simply didn't exist. From a very young age, his talent for magic was evident to everyone around him. Because of this, by the time he became a student, he had already developed his own regalia. His talent and his creation were revolutionary, yet the other students mocked him, saying it must be nice to be a genius or that his ideas were too difficult. Thus, everyone always commented that he was probably looking down on them in his heart. Soon, he realized that overwhelming talent only leads to a deep and inevitable loneliness. When he entered the academy, he even tried hard to make people understand him. But at some point, he came to a harsh and unfortunate realization. He then came to the conclusion that it was useless to try and stay on the same level as inferior people. After all, to polish a diamond, you need another diamond or something even harder. He understood that no matter how talented someone is, there's no way to improve unless they find a mage of equal or higher level. Because of this, he felt an overwhelming stagnation, to the point he couldn't find a reason to keep living. And yet, now he had been inspired by Abel after observing and measuring his incredible abilities. That presented him with new possibilities so he could finally improve. As he walked, his heart pounded with immeasurable anticipation, something he was feeling for the first time. To achieve this, he hired Musson, the illusionist, and Bardot of the Gale. Both were members of the Kronos Magic Society, just like him, and were among the highest-ranking mages in the world. With his renewed determination, he thought that if he could get to know Abel better, he would be willing to do absolutely anything it took. He was determined to use any means necessary to achieve his goal. Upon arriving, he excuses himself and opens the door to the room. Inside, Abel was sitting amidst high-tech screens, drinking calmly. Without turning around, the boy thanks him for making him so comfortable in that place. Surprised to see him there, Emerson can only call out Abel's name. He then questions him about how he got in, admitting he was caught by surprise. Emerson then explains that he had placed multiple and complex types of protective barriers in that room. Calmly, Abel replies that he barely felt the barriers, comparing them to simply tearing a piece of paper. Faced with this answer, Emerson laughs and praises the boy's talent, saying he'll need to check the magic source again. Abel then reveals that the friends he hired told him everything, and that the person controlling the surveillance regalia was Emerson himself, who stares at him, surprised by the discovery. Abel then bluntly orders him to stop watching him immediately. Hearing the order, Emerson just adjusts his glasses in silence with a serious expression. From above, Abel reinforces his order for Emerson to stop watching him. In silence, Emerson just adjusts his glasses as he processes the situation. In his thoughts, he fumes, realizing that his subordinates not only lost, but also sold him out. Abel, for his part, deduces that some kind of brainwashing magic was used, praising the technique's complexity. With a defiant tone, Emerson then asks what will happen if he refuses to obey. Suddenly, an intense dark energy begins to emanate from him. Engulfed by an overwhelming aura, Abel states that in that case, Emerson will die right here, right now. The crushing pressure from the energy causes the entire room to start shaking violently. Terrified by what he's seeing, Emerson can barely react to the power being unleashed. Overcome by the intimidation, he yells that he gets the message. His face bruised from the pressure, Emerson surrenders and declares he'll accept Abel's demand. The aura around Abel then begins to dissipate slowly. With calm restored, he simply thanks him for the cooperation. Awkward and relieved, Emerson just scratches his head, unsure of what to say. Once recovered, Emerson asks Abel to answer just one question. He then questions why someone so powerful would choose to stay at the academy, where there's nothing left for him to learn. Faced with the question, Abel reflects for a moment on the true reason. Calmly, he reveals that his only goal here is to live a peaceful school life. Abel then states that there's absolutely nothing more to his plan than that. Not understanding, Emerson asks if he's just there to enjoy his youth, and Abel confirms it. Incredulous, Emerson states that Abel must be messing with him. He then declares that Abel's talent is equal to, or perhaps even greater than, his own. He insists that someone so talented shouldn't waste their potential among ordinary students. Emerson then takes a step forward, approaching Abel imposingly. With intensity, he claims that with a talent like that, Abel could easily shape the entire world. He continues, saying the boy could rule over commoners, and that such a talent should be shown off. After hearing all this, Abel just lets out a long, tired sigh. Then, he shoves him aside and tells him to get out of his way. Impatiently, Abel says he isn't interested in this pointless talk and that it's a waste of time. As the door slams shut, Emerson is left alone in his messy office. He stands there for a moment, still visibly shaken from the encounter. His face covered in sweat, he reflects that even for someone who has faced countless geniuses, he's never been subjected to such pure killing intent, and concludes that it was magnificent. With a smile of pure excitement, he then whispers Abel's name to himself. He then celebrates that with Abel around, he'll finally have a chance to grow and evolve. Later, under the night sky, the scene shifts to the academy dormitory. At the door, Eliza confirms with Ted that the professor isn't in his room. Ted explains that he thought Abel would be with her, but adds that it's not unusual for him to disappear. He offers to pass on a message, but Eliza declines, saying she'll talk to Abel tomorrow. With that, the girl sits alone on a bench in the courtyard, lost in thought. Holding the bear he gave her, she thinks about how she just wanted to thank him for the gift. She then looks up, still absorbed in her thoughts about him. Suddenly, a familiar voice asks what someone wants by calling so late at night. Surprised, she quickly hides behind the bench, recognizing Abel's voice. From her hiding spot, Eliza hears a female voice apologizing, saying it's just that. She soon sees the voice belongs to Lilith, who is talking with Abel in a forest clearing. Shocked, the girl wonders what Professor Lilith is doing there with him. During their conversation, Lilith admits she just wanted to hear Abel's voice, leaving him confused. In a serious tone, he scolds her, saying he warned her to avoid doing anything conspicuous. Abel then suggests that if she needs to talk, she should do it after class when they both have time. Watching the scene, Eliza grows anxious, hoping Lilith will just leave. But in an unexpected move, Lilith leans in and kisses Abel on the forehead. Her face blushing, she moves in closer in a moment of pure emotion. As she hugs him, Abel comments that she really hasn't changed at all, leaving Eliza utterly horrified by the scene. Panicked and unable to process it, the girl mentally screams about what just happened. The morning sun illuminates the capital, marking the start of a new day. Soon, Yukari arrives at the cafe and greets Eliza cheerfully. However, she notices her friend's expression and is immediately confused. With a distant gaze, Eliza just murmurs Yukari's name in response. Worried about the situation, Yukari gets closer and asks if something happened. She then comments that it's strange for Eliza, who loves sweets, to have ordered just a cup of coffee. Next, Yukari asks if something is on her mind and offers to help in any way she can. Without beating around the bush, Eliza reveals she saw something, making her friend even more curious. In a flashback, she starts to tell her that she saw Abel with that woman. With the image of the kiss in her mind, she concludes, saying they were kissing. Back in the present, Eliza calls out to Yukari, still processing the scene she witnessed. With that, she asks directly if Abel and Professor Lilith are dating. Upon hearing the question, Yukari finally understands the situation and realizes that Eliza likes Abel. Suddenly, she stands up with a big smile and shouts that everything is fine. Confidently, Yukari assures her there's nothing to worry about, as Abel and Professor Lilith are blood siblings. With a smile, she explains that it's a rather popular story, since they both stand out a lot. Then, Yukari mentions that even Ted knows about it and considers them a pair of strange siblings. Still in disbelief, Eliza argues that, even so, their behavior is not normal at all. In her mind, she replays the scene of a pair of blood siblings meeting in secret in the forest. The girl then remembers the moment they kissed, stuttering in her thoughts. With a finger on her chin, Yukari ponders the situation, trying to find an explanation. Eliza insists, pointing out that they are still a student and a teacher, and that this could create awkward situations at the academy. Yukari then argues that, if they're a very close and tight-knit family, would it be so strange for them to express their affection with a kiss like they would as children? Hearing the explanation, Eliza pauses for a moment and admits her friend has a good point. With a gentle smile, Yukari just agrees with a yes. Completely convinced, Eliza cheers up and declares there's nothing wrong with family members kissing each other. Yukari, however, thinks to herself that, despite the explanation, there are still other things that don't fit the story. With her determination renewed, Eliza concludes that there are many different kinds of families in the world. With newfound energy, Eliza thanks her friend and says she's finally gotten her appetite back. Yukari celebrates that this is the Eliza she knows and suggests they eat a cake to celebrate. With a huge smile, Eliza points at the menu and orders a giant parfait, scaring Yukari with her appetite. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the training routine continues as usual for some students. Inside the training room, two students watch a first-year student with curiosity. They then wonder how long the boy has been running non-stop on the treadmill. Soon, one of them replies that it's probably been 2 hours, leaving the other shocked by his stamina. For Abel, however, maintaining his physical training is just part of his daily routine. As he runs, he observes that, even though it's a holiday, the training room is empty as always. He then reflects that modern mages seem to neglect physical training, considering it a wasted treasure. Suddenly, Ted bursts into the room shouting that he's finally found his teacher after searching everywhere. With a big smile, he asks if Abel has been here the whole time he was missing. Tired, Abel turns off the treadmill and laments that, of all people, it had to be Ted who found him. Even annoyed that his peaceful place was invaded, he turns around and asks what Ted needs. With an excited look, Ted then asks him if he's already decided which research group he'll join. While drying himself off, Abel remembers hearing something about research groups at the entrance ceremony. Ted then accuses him of having completely forgotten, but Abel replies that he's simply not interested in the matter. Enthusiastically, Ted explains that a research group is an extracurricular activity, like a club, to research magic and regalia. He even adds that some groups have achieved results so good that they were awarded by the country. Excited, Ted reveals that he's going to the group's recruitment event and invites him to come along. Abel, however, dismisses the invitation, saying it doesn't sound interesting and that he should find someone else. In his thoughts, the boy reflects that, in any case, he has learned something from his many experiences.
He concludes that the most efficient way to research magic is by simply doing everything by himself. Therefore, he doesn't believe that spending his time with more people could lead to a better result. Ted, however, leans on the machine and insists that this is a great opportunity for him. He then argues that there might be a research group there that could pique his interest. Faced with his insistence, Abel just watches him in silence for a moment.
Ted then suggests there might be something about sports or even scraping magic, anything that might appeal to him. Abel then ponders that, even if it's just a student activity, having no experience in it could be a problem. The boy continues to stare at him with a look full of expectation, waiting for an answer. With a sigh of resignation, the boy finally gives in to the persistent request. He then agrees to go, but asks for some time to change first, to Ted's delight. Upon arriving at the recruitment event, Ted is impressed by the bustling atmosphere. As soon as they walk in, he remarks that the place is packed and looks more like a festival. Soon, a brown-haired student approaches and invites them to the Fire Magic Research Club. At another booth, a white-haired boy calls them over to the Hunting Research Club. Amid all the shouting, it's clear the research groups are split between magic and sports. Abel then notes that with so many different clubs, they probably won't have time to see them all. Suddenly, someone shouts, getting their attention. When they turn around, they come face to face with an imposing figure in a knight's armor. Startled, Ted backs away and yells, asking why the hell a knight would be there. With a laugh, the guy takes off his helmet, revealing it's just gear they use for a game. He then compliments Ted's build and asks if he'd be interested in a sport called Army Foot. The student then starts explaining the rules, leaving Ted completely dizzy from the information overload. As he watches, Abel concludes the sport seems to be a variation of rugby from 200 years ago. Awkwardly, Ted tries to decline the invitation, saying he likes to work out, but that it might not be for him. In an attempt to escape, he turns to Abel and asks what his professor thinks of the offer. Curious, the guy in armor asks if by professor, Ted means the kid with the amber eyes. With a faint smile, he says he can't accept the offer and declines the invitation. Abel then reflects on how things are in this era, where a mage with amber eyes is seen as a symbol of a failed student, one who can barely use magic with ease. Suddenly, the team captain approaches and asks about the situation with the new recruits. In a whisper, the guy explains he found a promising freshman, but his condition for joining was that his amber-eyed friend had to join the team too, leaving Ted speechless. With a loud laugh, the captain declares that, of course, a condition like that would never be accepted. He then states that if they let an inferior eye join the club, their honor would go down the drain. Annoyed by the comment, Abel thinks to himself there was no need to say that right in front of him. However, he soon realizes that this gives him a reason to just walk away. With tension in the air, Ted and Abel just watch the scene in silence. Before things get worse, Abel flicks Ted on the head and tells him it's time to go. He then says out loud that he's not interested in playing with a ball or anything like that anyway. Furious, the captain turns to Abel and asks him what he just said. In a serious tone, Abel repeats that he's not interested in playing ball and asks if he needs to say it again. Annoyed by the response, the captain yells at the kid to listen up. He then declares he won't tolerate being disrespected by someone as ignorant as him. Faced with the provocation, Ted and Abel just stare back at him with serious expressions. Suddenly, the captain's teammate stomps his foot hard on the ground and charges at them. With a furious glare, he says that if Abel thinks they're just playing with a ball, then he should say it again after taking this powerful direct hit. However, Abel dodges the attack with a quick, precise move. As he moves past him, Abel lands a kick on his feet. From the impact, the guy in armor nearly loses his balance, surprising everyone. Gritting his teeth, he curses in anger as he glares at a calm Abel. Without hesitation, he yells that it's not over and charges at the boy with everything he's got. Tired of the commotion, Abel decides it's best to be as discreet as possible and stop them peacefully. With that, he leaps into the air and says he'll return the ball to the upperclassmen. He then uses material reinforcement magic to strengthen the ball. Then, he throws the ball with impressive force and speed. The projectile hits the captain square in the face, who can barely react to the impact. The force of the throw sends the captain flying backward and crashing to the ground. Knocked out, the captain lies on the ground as other students wonder what's going on. Seeing the result, Abel realizes he might have overdone it a bit. In the crowd, a student yells for the captain, while Abel thinks how hard it is to adjust the power of his attacks. After that, they kept walking through the event, but Abel noticed the magic clubs were all very low level. Besides, the sports clubs were too time-consuming, with some even having activities on weekends. While Ted is surrounded by students trying to recruit him, Abel decides to just hit the gym by himself. He then concludes that, as expected, he doesn't need to join any club to reach his goals. Suddenly, a voice in the distance shouts, "Let's eliminate all war from this world," confusing the boy. Turning around, he sees a group of hooded figures inviting him to the anti-magic club in the name of peace. One of the members hands him a flyer for the Magic Eradication Research Club. Abel is intrigued by the idea and wonders why they would enroll in the academy if they want to eradicate magic. With an excited shout, the group's leader declares that the light of glory will now shine upon the anti-magic club. He then proclaims their time for revolution has finally arrived. Looking closer, Abel realizes the group's leader is someone he knows. With a look of surprise, he recognizes him as Bass, who advances with his sword in hand. Abel reflects that he'd heard Bass had enrolled here, but didn't expect their reunion to be like this. Elsewhere, Bass remarks that Abel looks fragile and that Ted has stopped talking about him. Even from a distance, Bass wonders if, despite those eyes, Abel is really okay. With a neutral expression, Abel just watches the crowd around him. Suddenly, a boy with green highlights in his hair is called by someone in the middle of the festival. Turning around, he reacts with surprise when he realizes who's calling him. Abel then gestures for him to come over for a second, confusing the guy. With disdain, the boy asks what this is about, stating he has no intention of getting along with him. In surprise, he asks if Abel has never even heard of AMO, the Anti-Magic Organization. He then explains that it's the Anti-Magic Organization, or AMO for short. The guy then comments that while they preach peace, their methods are pretty radical. He then says it's a popular social issue and that Abel should read up on it, making him pensive. With a superior tone, the boy calls him an outsider and asks if he's decided which club he's going to join. Before Abel can answer, the guy scoffs and says no one in their right mind would accept an inferior eye like him. However, Abel interrupts him and states that he can recommend the perfect club for him. With a smile, he tells the guy to follow him, assuring him that in that club, he'll be welcomed with open arms. As he walks, the boy thinks that since he was heading home anyway, one more disappointment won't make a difference. Upon arriving, Abel points to a table and tells the boy, this is it. At the table, a blue-haired girl sits alone, reading a book under an umbrella. Abel observes the scene and wonders what's wrong with that girl. He then notices everyone is moving as if they're avoiding her, not even glancing her way. With a smirk, the green-haired guy remarks, "You don't know her, do you?" He then introduces her as Noel, the girl everyone avoids. The guy explains that she's nicknamed the Ice Queen, which piques Abel's curiosity. He continues, saying everyone from prep school knows her well. In a flashback, it's revealed Noel is a beast, with both brains and brawn, but she doesn't try to get along with anyone. Abel then understands that's why she's called the Ice Queen, since no one has ever seen her smile. With a taunting tone, the guy suggests they might get along since birds of a feather flock together. After saying his goodbyes, he leaves, leaving Abel to ponder the situation. Abel then analyzes the color of Noel's eyes, deducing that her sapphire eyes indicate excellence in water attribute magic. He concludes her Ice Queen nickname probably comes from her eyes, and that she seems stronger than the average student. Finally, Abel reads the club's name, Ancient Magic Research Club, and wonders what people in this era consider ancient. Abel notices the girl doesn't seem interested in recruiting anyone, and that she hasn't even noticed his presence. So, he walks up and taps the table to get her attention, saying, "Hey." Looking up from her book, the girl replies with a simple, "Yes?" Abel then says he's interested in the Ancient Magic Research Club and asks her to tell him more about it. The girl notes he's a first year like her, and then cuts the formalities. Without another word, she places a book on the table. She then hands him a wooden puzzle box and challenges him, "Solve this." The object is a complex cube, covered in carvings and mechanisms on all its sides. As soon as he sees the cube, Abel observes it intently for a moment. As he examines the object, Abel recognizes it as a labyrinth runner. In his thoughts, he recalls that the item is a puzzle used to test the ability to analyze complex magical syntaxes. Holding the cube, he feels a wave of nostalgia and notes its complexity indicates it's not an off-the-shelf product. Abel then deduces that the girl probably built the labyrinth runner herself. With that, he begins to analyze the object's magical syntax. Next, he channels his magical power through the correct path, causing the cube to glow. With a click, the box opens, revealing the puzzle has been solved. Surprised, the blue-haired girl stares at him with wide eyes. Without wasting time, Abel hands the box back to her and says he's already solved it. Incredulous, she takes the object and wonders if it's broken, since it was solved so quickly. Calmly, he confirms that it isn't broken and that he really did solve it. The girl then comments that it should have taken at least an hour to solve. Having completed the challenge, Abel says he has done what she asked and now wants to know more about the club. Faced with this proof of his skill, she just watches him in silence for a moment. Finally, The girl stands up and leads Abel upstairs, toward the club room. Abel follows the blue-haired girl down a silent, empty hallway. With a curious gaze, he observes the place's architecture as he walks. As they approach a door, he notices a sign stating that entry is forbidden for ordinary students. Intrigued, Abel asks if she's sure this is the right way. Without turning around, the girl simply replies that this is the correct place. Then she stops in front of a smooth wall with no visible door. The boy watches her closely, impressed by what he sees. With a swift motion, the girl pulls a small golden object from her uniform. The object turns out to be an ancient key, which she holds delicately. She then inserts the key into a hidden hole in the wall, and it fits perfectly. With a click, the outline of a door begins to glow on the wall. Abel then realizes that it's a secret door. The door opens, revealing a passageway to a hidden room. Upon entering, the girl announces that this is the club room. As they step inside, she leans against a table, while Abel observes the vast interior of the room. Looking around, Abel comments on the sheer number of books, estimating there must be thousands. He then notes that the room is quite large for a student club, and asks where the other members are. With a direct response, the blue-haired girl says there's no one else there, which surprises Abel. She then reveals that until that moment, she was the sole member of the Ancient Magic Research Club. At this revelation, Abel simply replies that he understands the situation. He then figures that if the labyrinth runner was the entrance exam, it makes sense that a normal student couldn't solve it. Next, Abel approaches a bookshelf and picks up one of the books. Flipping through it, he notices the books here are quite old, and that this copy is 50 years old. Curious, he says he wants to see the oldest book she has, and the girl replies that the oldest one is 100 years old. She then explains that most magic books from the past were burned during the Great Calamity. Hearing her explanation, Abel confirms that he had already figured as much. In a flashback, he remembers that over 200 years ago, the hero's party, including him, defeated the Demon King and brought peace. However, less than a year later, a dispute over the Demon King's territory sparked a long war among humans. This war, called the Great Calamity, lasted for 100 years and was marked by unprecedented destruction. It's believed that the number of casualties from this war exceeded the death toll of the previous war against the Demon King. Noel then explains that the long war exhausted people's minds and bodies, giving rise to anti-magic beliefs. Because of this, she continues, people grew to hate magic and strove to completely erase it from the world. As a result, the girl reveals that most of the magic books from all over the world were burned to ashes. Abel questions how such a major incident is so rarely discussed, but Noel claims it's because many in power support this belief. She then concludes that this made the book burnings a taboo, which caused the magic of the current era to become inferior. Finally, Noel declares that the purpose of this research club is to learn the great magic that existed in ancient times. With a tone of admiration, Abel praises the noble sentiment that drives the club. He then reflects that most people in this era don't even realize that magic is in a deep decline. To him, the simple fact that Noel understands the current situation is proof enough that she's an excellent mage. Surprised by his reaction, the girl asks if he won't laugh at her goal, but Abel asks why he would. She then explains that others have told her that modern magic, which uses regalia, is much more convenient. Abel agrees that regalia are indeed convenient, as they allow everyone to use magic the same way. Since that was considered normal, Noel, who exclusively researches ancient magic, was treated as the weird girl by other mages, which made her feel isolated. In a serious tone, Abel states that he won't laugh at her efforts. He then explains that, for whatever reason, he's not in the habit of laughing at others' efforts. Hearing his answer, the girl just observes him in silence and calls him peculiar. In a friendlier tone, she asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Abel. Then, the girl introduces herself as well, saying her name is Noel. Finally, she hands him the room key, officially welcoming him into the club. In a friendly tone, Noel says she'll lend him the spare key and asks him to come back tomorrow. The next day, the routine at the academy goes on as usual. At the end of class, Abel tries to wake up Ted, who is fast asleep on his books. He then decides to leave his friend there, figuring he's exhausted from being chased by the sports clubs. As he leaves the classroom, Abel is approached by Eliza, who calls his name. The girl says she has a question for him, making Abel curious. With an excited look, Eliza asks if he has decided which research group to join yet. Abel replies that he's taken a look around, but hasn't decided yet. Then, Eliza invites him to visit a research club with her after class tomorrow. She reveals she's never ridden a dragon and has always wanted to, and then invites him to come along. Looking at the pamphlet, Abel reads that it's the Dragon Flight Research Club. He then reflects that he hasn't seen any dragons since he was reincarnated, and it's been a while since he's played with them. With that, Abel accepts the invitation, much to Eliza's surprise and delight. As she runs down the hall, she makes him promise not to go back on his word. Watching her walk away, Abel thinks she should probably make more friends instead of only asking him. Walking down the hallway, Abel heads towards the club room. Suddenly, he senses something strange and stops for a moment. When he turns around, he finds Emerson standing in the middle of the hall. Abel then asks him what he's doing there. With a smile, Emerson says it's a pleasant surprise to find Abel there, but the boy just demands an answer. He then reveals he's the advisor for the Ancient Magic Research Club, much to Abel's surprise. With a nonchalant air, Emerson says he only comes by now and then to observe, with no ulterior motives. Suspicious, Abel asks him to have a little faith in him. Emerson then asks what Abel is doing there, and the boy replies he has business in that room. With a mischievous smile, Emerson says he understands the situation. He then concludes that the girl from the club, Noel, likes Abel too. In an inviting tone, Emerson suggests they talk for a bit, leaving Abel confused. He then reveals Noel was enrolled on the headmaster's recommendation and is the only first year with a special class exemption. Emerson explains that her abilities already surpass many of the teachers, and there are no classes that meet her needs. That's why the academy gave her that secret library and let her study on her own. With a smile, Emerson reveals that Abel also qualifies for the exemption and offers to recommend him. Abel refuses the offer, reaffirming that his only goal is to have a peaceful student life. With a serious gaze, Abel just stares at him, absorbing the information. Emerson then points out that Abel's actions are contradictory, questioning why he'd get involved with someone everyone avoids. Abel defends himself, saying he's not getting involved with her, but is simply interested in the books in that room. At this, Emerson again accuses him of being contradictory, since if he wants a peaceful life, he shouldn't be seeking out ancient books. He then says Abel must have realized by now that it's easier to just mind his own business. With a curious look, Emerson asks why he's there, stating that he's very interested in the answer. Suddenly, he moves closer and touches Abel's face. In a swift movement, he concentrates for an instant. Then, he gives the boy a pat on the shoulder. With a smile, Emerson says goodbye and wishes Abel good luck. Standing in the hallway, Abel remains silent, processing the strange encounter. In a flashback, Emerson reaffirms that Abel won't have a peaceful life if he gets involved with Noel. He then goes on saying Abel must have realized this and asks him why he's doing it. Back in the present, Abel stands before the secret door, lost in thought. He then decides to analyze what Emerson did to him. With a smile, Abel realizes Emerson planned to spy on him with a spell on his shoulder. Next, he decides to check inside the room as a precaution before entering. In his mind, he laments that this wasn't a good hiding spot either. As he opens the door, he finds Noel sitting inside, startling her. The girl quickly gets up, startled by the sudden entrance. Abel then bows apologetically as Noel approaches him. She gets closer and stares at him with a serious expression. In a calm tone, she calls his name and says she's been waiting for him. Given her reaction, Abel wonders if she's some kind of pet. Without further delay, she says she's here as promised and asks what he wanted to show her. Noel then turns and takes a wooden box from a shelf. Opening the box, Noel pulls out an old, dusty book. She then hands it to Abel, saying she brought it from her home. Taking the book, Abel notices burn marks on its cover. He also notices that despite its condition, the book is sealed with a magical syntax, making it hard to open. In a serious tone, Noel reveals the book is called the Akashic Records. Abel then remembers reading about it in the history books. He recalls that, according to legend, whoever learned the magic it contained would gain the power to control the world. Curious, Abel asks why she brought such a valuable item, and Noel answers that it was because he wanted to read old books. Surprised by her casual demeanor, Abel wonders if she's royalty or nobility. He then concludes that, either way, she is no ordinary student and must have been raised in special circumstances. In a solemn tone, Noel says this is her treasure, and she will only show it to Abel. Upon opening the book, Abel is impressed by the precision of the magic formulas written inside. He notes the burn marks make it hard to read, but he can still make out some things. Abel reflects that even 200 years ago, he can't think of anyone else who could write such complex formulas. As he flips through the pages, he continues to analyze the book's contents with great interest. Analyzing the book more closely, Abel has no doubt that the writing style is extremely familiar, as if he wrote it himself. Suddenly, he finds a dedication, "To my dear comrade Daytona." He then asks Noel if it's a family heirloom, and she confirms she got it from her family's storehouse. She then explains that her ancestor from 200 years ago received it from a skilled mage he respected. With this revelation, Abel finally understands everything. With a hopeful look, Noel then asks if Abel can read what's written in the book. Closing his eyes for a moment, Abel simply answers, well, in his thoughts, he confirms that of course he can read it because he's the one who wrote it. He reflects that the book was written in an ancient language, standard in his era, but difficult to decipher now. To test her, Abel points to a page and says it's about resurrection magic, which shocks her. He realizes that even though the magic is complex, he managed to explain it briefly. Observing her face, Abel notices she looks exactly like the Daytona he knew in his youth. With that, he is certain that Noel is indeed a descendant of Daytona, the water heroine. Impressed with his explanation, Noel asks him to teach her more about the book's contents. With teary eyes, Noel asks him to teach her more about the book she's holding. Abel apologizes and says they have to leave it for another day, since curfew is approaching and he has commitments. The girl then looks at him with a disappointed expression. She then says she agrees, but on the condition that he lets her use the room again. With a smile, Abel agrees and promises to teach her how to read the book next time. The girl's expression changes to one of complete surprise at his promise. Happily, she hugs the book tightly and agrees to their arrangement. The next day after class, they meet in front of the dragon hangar. Soon, an excited voice calls out to everyone there. Then, a group of young men greets them with roses, thanking them for coming to the Dragonflight Research Club. Abel then notices the flamboyant appearance and strong scent of perfume from the club members. With looks of pure horror, he and Eliza wonder if this is really the Dragonflight Research Club. With a wide smile, the club leader gets the attention of all the new recruits. Next, he thanks everyone for coming and invites them to relax and have fun together. Shocked, Abel and Eliza wonder if this is even the right club, since the members don't look like dragon knights. In his thoughts, Abel reflects that caring for a dragon is hard work, as they eat a lot and are proud. He then concludes he can't imagine those frivolous kids taking care of such a powerful creature. With an apologetic expression, Eliza tells Abel she didn't know the club members would be like that. Suddenly, a girl raises her hand to ask a question, and the leader flirtatiously agrees. The girl then asks what the difference is between their club and the Dragon Knight Research Club next door. With a smile, the leader praises the question and says the biggest difference is probably their vibe. He then explains that the club's main goal is to have fun, with no formalities. With that, he states that regardless of riding dragons, everyone is free to have fun however they want. Abel understands this explains the relaxed atmosphere, but he's still surprised by the situation. He reflects that the dragons of his era were precious resources, and there was no such thing as using them just for pleasure. With a finger on his chin, the boy concludes that while this is strange, it proves the world has become much more peaceful. Next, the club leader enthusiastically announces that it's time for everyone to start riding dragons. The club leader then instructs everyone to pair up with the senior members. As he watches the movement, Abel notices something strange about the group's composition. He then notices that everyone is approaching one another very enthusiastically. Soon, Abel concludes that, with the exception of him, all the visitors are girls, and all the senior members are guys. With a headache, he wonders if they're really using dragons as a dating tool. Suddenly, the club leader approaches Eliza and says he's very happy she came for him. Awkwardly, she replies yes, but that she's with a friend. Upon seeing Abel, the club leader just stares at him in silence for a moment. Then, he turns to Eliza and invites her to ride a dragon with him. Enthusiastically, he promises to prepare the best dragon just for her, leaving her speechless. Grabbing Abel's arm, she says she wanted to ride a dragon with him today. With a smile, the club leader explains that can't happen, as the dragons are for 2 people. Abel realizes he doesn't like how they're using the dragons, but he knows Eliza was looking forward to this. With that, he tells Eliza not to worry about him, and that she should just have fun. With a blushing face, the girl just stares at him in silence, not knowing what to say. Reluctantly, Eliza agrees with his suggestion, but turns away annoyed, leaving Abel confused by the mood swing. Abel wonders why she got upset, since he was just being considerate of her feelings. As they walk, the club leader tells Eliza not to worry about her friend. He then assures her that he'll arrange a dragon for Abel too. Upon entering the barn, Abel notices a strong, unique smell that brings back some memories. He then recalls that one of the biggest differences between dragons and other animals is their shocking energy consumption. To maintain their massive bodies and the ability to fly, an adult dragon needs 300 kilos of food per day. Consequently, the amount of droppings also increases, to the point where a keeper could spend the whole day just cleaning. With a smile, the club leader draws Eliza's attention to one of the cages. He then introduces his favorite dragon, an imposing blue specimen named Saint Glory. Amazed, Eliza exclaims that this is probably the first time she's seen such a large dragon. Abel agrees it's a good size and reflects that, in his era, only nobles and royalty could have a dragon like that. He then thinks that he was worried the dragons might have been affected by the decline of magic in this era. However, he concludes that in the last 200 years, research on raising dragons might have actually improved. Seeing Abel's reaction, the club leader approaches and calls out to him. With a gesture, the club leader says the other dragons are in the back room and that Abel can pick whichever one he likes best. He then turns to Eliza and invites her to go out and enjoy the journey through the skies together. Reluctantly, Eliza agrees to the invitation while looking back at Abel, who remains silent. Abel then watches in silence as the two walk away and leave the barn. Alone in the hallway, he notices that everyone else has already gone outside. He then approaches a large wooden door, deducing that's where his dragon is being kept. Suddenly, a keeper spots him and shouts for him to wait, questioning what he's doing there. In desperation, the keeper warns him that the dragon in that room, Leonhardt, really hates humans. He finishes with a warning not to go in there carelessly, but Abel just stares at the door with a calm gaze. The caretaker apologizes for suddenly shouting and introduces himself as one of the dragon keepers. Abel replies that it's fine and says he actually wanted to see the dragon. With a smile, the caretaker says it'll be quicker if Abel sees it for himself and invites him inside. As they open the door, the two carefully enter the stable. Abel falls silent for a moment, surprised by what he sees. Inside the cage, a massive and aggressive red dragon lets out a mighty roar. With a fierce gaze and a scar across one eye, the creature stares at them suspiciously. Smiling with admiration, Abel praises the magnificent dragon standing before him. The caretaker explains that Leonhardt is the oldest dragon there, over 100 years old, and was once famous on the racing tracks. He goes on to say that some people suggested it would be better to simply put him down. However, the caretaker reveals that Leo was beloved by the younger dragons, and his presence makes caring for them much easier. With conviction, he declares that he can't allow Leo to be put down without first finding him a new rider. Hearing those words, the dragon simply ignores him, leaving the caretaker frustrated. He then warns Abel not to enter the cage, because if Leo gets agitated, people might start talking about putting him down again. Abel realizes that the other dragons behaving themselves around Leonhardt means he's still the strongest one there. Abel also realizes that the dragon probably doesn't want some useless human giving him orders, so he keeps his true strength to himself. Speaking respectfully, Abel addresses the old dragon, Leonhardt. He then asks the creature to come closer, putting it on guard. Abel slowly reaches his hand through the bars in a gesture of trust. The dragon simply watches him with its scarred eye, wary of his approach. Panicking, the caretaker shouts for Abel to back away, asking if he didn't hear the warnings. Abel, however, simply gestures for the caretaker to stay quiet. After a brief moment, the dragon rises and slowly walks toward the boy. Abel then says the dragon must have felt trapped in there and invites him to come outside and have a little fun. The dragon asks if the boy wants to test his mana, and Abel nods. With a simple gesture, he creates a glowing sphere of mana in his hand. The dragon stares at the sphere for a moment. Suddenly, a powerful wave of mana bursts through the stable, shocking the caretaker. Overwhelmed by that power, the dragon lowers its head in submission. Stunned, the caretaker stammers as he watches the fearsome Leo bow before Abel. Speechless, the caretaker can only watch as the dragon lowers its head in respect. Abel then tells the dragon that the caretaker is someone he can trust and suggests that he should try listening to him. Following Abel's advice, Leo walks over to the caretaker, who stares back in surprise and fear. Shocked by the sight, the caretaker stammers and asks Abel who he really is. With a smile, Abel replies that he's just a student and that he'll be borrowing Leonhardt for a while. Elsewhere, Eliza soars through the sky on the back of a blue dragon. After landing, she tells the club leader how amazing it is that dragons can take them to places like this. From afar, she looks down at the academy and the city, both appearing tiny from that distance. In her thoughts, she regrets that it would have been much more fun if Abel had been there with her. The club leader then interrupts her and offers her a cup of tea, which she gratefully accepts. With a smile, he suggests they take a short break there, and the girl agrees. Suddenly, she feels something strange, and her expression changes to one of surprise. Before she can react, the club leader unexpectedly grabs her from behind. Startled, Eliza drops the teacup to the ground and yells for him to wait. She demands to know what he's doing and tells him to stop, but he simply calls her cruel. In a suggestive tone, the club leader asks what she means, implying that this is exactly why she came there. He then accuses her of coming alone with a boy, flaunting her seductive body. Furious, Eliza cuts him off, but he taunts her by asking if she was planning to do something with her lower eye. Angrily, she declares that a vile man like him is a disgrace to the nobility. The next moment, Eliza surrounds him with flames and shouts for him to prepare to fight. Suddenly, she feels dizzy, and her vision starts to blur. Before she can do anything, she collapses unconscious, and the young man comments that the drug has finally kicked in. Lying on the ground, Eliza realizes she was drugged and that the tea had been poisoned. The young man then boasts about his top grades in magical alchemy and asks how it feels to be completely unable to move. With a malicious grin, he steps closer and says they can finally have a little fun. Desperate, Eliza can only mumble a few words as Abel's shadow appears on the ground. Flying at incredible speed, a red dragon dives down from the sky toward them. Riding on its back, Abel praises Leo's speed, saying that very few dragons from his era were this fast. Meanwhile, from above, he watches the other club members, and concludes that all he sees are people flirting, yet they still have the nerve to call it a dragon flight. As he flies overhead, Abel notices something strange on the ground. Below, the club leader is on top of Eliza, who appears to be unconscious. Desperate, the girl cries out for help, calling Abel's name. With a grin, the young man says that the dragon Abel borrowed was the worst one of them all. He then compares Eliza to the dragon, saying they both have enormous pride and love putting up a fight. With a mocking smile, he suggests that Abel might have already been eaten by the dragon since he never even saw him fly properly. Furious, Eliza curses at him and screams for him to get off her. In a teasing tone, the young man says it wouldn't hurt for her to use a cuter voice. He then whispers that she should be a good girl, so he can be nice to her.